Now it's okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, please sit down so that we can start. Okay, we are going to wait for 30 seconds, just that everybody sits down, and then we are going to start. Okay, I think we are all settled. So, dear ladies, dear gentlemen, welcome to the second edition of the Conclave on the future of Europe. My name is Peter Grk. I'm a Secretary General of the Bled Strategic Forum from Slovenia. For those of you who don't know Conclave, let me say just a few things. First, Conclave is a project which was born out of passion. And it's driven by love. Love for Europe, love for this continent, love for, I would say, the most remarkable and beautiful political project in the history of humankind. But Europe also faces a lot of problems, also faces a lot of challenges. And it needs active participation from everybody, especially from us, the concerned public, the citizens who care about how Europe is going to develop in the future and how Europe is going to navigate through these murky, dangerous waters that we are finding ourselves and also the rest of the geostrategic international community. You know, I still remember a call from Guillaume Clossat. He called me, Peter, you know, Europe is a too precious project to be only left in the hands of the politicians. We need to help them. We need to become active. We need to sit down and come up with ideas on, and recommendations at the end of the day on how we see Europe in the next 20, 40 years. Because I don't have to tell you, you know, there is a lot of issues on the table. I mean, most of them you know yourselves. We have a change in the nature of the transatlantic relations, but more about that when we go deeply or more deep into the conference, and I'm certain that speakers are going to address also this issue, but also, you know, the rest of the world, namely China, India, also Africa, is looking at Europe to see where are we going to go, what we are going to decide, and how our future and relations with partners are going to look like. So this was the basic idea. First conclave were held in 2023 in Cascais in Portugal. We made a report which was widely spread among political elites in the countries of the European Union, but also inside of the EU institutions. And we saw that if you do a thorough and good job, then the ideas, the recommendations that come out of this kind of conferences as Conclave are being taken seriously. And I think this was also why we decided to continue with the process. Actually, Conclave, at the end of the day, became so important that last year Americans even made a movie about Conclave. As I said at the beginning, Guillaume Clossat is the man with the ideas, the man with the plan. And he assembled a really interesting group of people who care about Europe, who care about how we are going to live as a society in the next years to come. So it's only fitting that the first word and the welcome speech goes to the chairman of the Conclave board and my very good and dear friend, Guillaume Clossat from France. Guillaume, please.
Thank you very much, Peter. Well, you said what I wanted to say, so I don't know what to say anymore, but just a reflection that once we share with Jean-Claude Juncker. I spoke with him about the French commissioner, and he said, Guillaume, I am surprised about what you say. It's not a French commissioner. It's a European commissioner coming from France. Just to say that the European mindset is a matter of being subtle. And the DNA of Europe is a matter, and our joint friend Slavoj Žižek is the pop of it, of critical thinking. The capacity to take distance, the capacity to articulate short, medium, and long term. And if I have to come to the history of Conclave, it came from a discussion with one of the co-founders of Conclave. We are 12 co-founders, so I speak on behalf of the board of Conclave, which is composed of 12 remarkable personalities coming from science, business, trade unions, politics, civil society. And the discussion I had with one of the Belgian co-founders, the older, Etienne d'Avignon, was about the fact that if there was places to discuss the future of the transatlantic relationship with a variety of people and discipline, we became aware that there was no places to discuss the future of Europe with a diversity of, sufficient diversity of people. Well, we have the president of the Economic and Social European Committee here, and he could say, but this is the place for the Council. He's right. But there is a need for informal place for that, where we combine different things. Academia, art, culture, politics, business, trade union, civil society. Different horizons, short, medium, long term. Different thinking, different geographies, and the methodology. And at the end of the day, Jacques Delors or Jean Monnet might say that the methodology is the most important thing. What is it about? When you look at the discussion of the European Commission or the Council or in the nation state, we speak about many issue problems. But you may notice something. We always have a silo and emergency thinking. And the beauty of the thing is to go beyond silos and beyond emergency. Because that is the only way to be a responsible citizen. the conclave, is born for that. It is this yearly forum of free people who want to contribute freely to the future of this continent. But if you want to contribute usefully, you need not to be center of on yourself. And that's why the conference we have today with speakers, with leaders coming from the rest of the world, by alphabetic order in order to avoid sensitiveness. Africa, America, Asia, I forgot, no, anyway. But if I may say, China and India are in Africa, in Asia. Not yeah, okay. President Trump proposed to annex Groenland and maybe tomorrow the European Union. But if I may say, I have a proposal. I propose to the USA to become a member of the European Union and to share our value. I know that the Mexican president makes the same offer, but I think we should put this offer on the table. Once that said, now you know about Conclave, about the idea of Conclave, about how Conclave was born and the kind of usefulness we want to have. Peter said it's a matter of impact. And yes, it's a matter of impact. The first Conclave took place 13 months ago in Cascais in Portugal, and we had a very relevant discussion about the state of play of Europe and what Europe should become. And the conclusions are the following. There is a systemic dropout, economic, financial, industrial, technological, scientific, geostrategic. We have the resource in order to bring rapidly answer, but for that, we need to have the political and societal willingness to transform our union in a global, responsible, sustainable power. And in this respect, we need to engage with the world, and we need not to be naive, and we need to be also sometimes able to forget ourselves and our ready-made ID. And we have a requirement of emergency because the world is not expecting us anymore, and sometimes does not consider us anymore. That was the first conclave. There was a report, and this report was shared with the person in charge of 5 reports. So let's say the Draghi report on competitiveness, the Letta report on the single market, the Aitor report. I don't see if Manuel is here. So as you know, we share with you before the Aitor report of science and technology, the Tirol report, the Nobel Prize of Economics on high tech. Jean-Pierre Bourguignon made the job, and the Ninisto report on defense and security. And our objective was that the statement of Conclave were understood by the different persons in charge of this report, and that our recommendations, when they are relevant, were included in the recommendation of the different reports. It was not a visible work. It was a work of influence. And to speak frankly, we were quite satisfied by the result because, in fact, the different recommendations and conclusions of the Conclave report are taken in these 5 reports. And somehow, this is a new base for discussion of the European leadership. Now, the objective of this second conclave is to transform a common understanding of the situation, systemic dropout, necessity to transform the EU into a power, into implementation. And this is very difficult. This is very difficult because we have a geopolitical situation which is very difficult. We have allies. Sometimes you wonder if they are really allies or enemy. That's the question. And you have a political leadership, or at least some leaders, which are completely paralyzed. And the responsibility of Conclave is to think about the way in order to create the dynamic which allow to transform understandings into political action and political reality. So tomorrow and the day after, for 2 days, we are going to work on that with 3 top priority issues: geopolitics, defense, and security, after President Trump election, which is a reality check for us. First thing, science and technology as a key driver for competitiveness and, I would say, inclusiveness, cohesion. And third, resources. And when I speak about resources, it's financial resources, of course, but it's also human resources. And when you speak about human resources, you speak about leadership, you speak about narratives, you speak about engagement. Engagement of citizens, engagement of civil society, engagement of businesses, engagement of intellectuals, engagement of trade unionists, engagement of researchers, and I could go on. And this is a challenge for Europe. Answer rapidly these 3 questions with transformational plan. So we will try to contribute for that. We are going to prepare briefings with 2 short-term perspectives. The first perspective is a series of retreats organized by the President of the European Council for the European leadership. And there will be a first one, early February, on defense and security. And we would like to prepare a briefing in this perspective. The second short-term perspective is a request of the President of the European Commission to the Commissioner to present the roadmap, the strategy, in 1 month. And we would like also to contribute to that. But our main concern is to contribute to the European debate and to put the right question on the table. It's easy to put questions on the table, but to put the right question is not easy in order to engage citizens, because we are aware that without the commitment of citizens, all what we are saying, all what we are preparing is irrelevant. Engaging citizenship in Europe, because we have a vision of democracy, is essential. So these are our day-to-day challenge, and I'm very happy that with the participants of Conclave, and many of them are already here, the Conclavers, we could go ahead and we could work. Once that's said, I have to make some special thinking. So I want to thank our different partners. And first of all, the Kingdom of Belgium and the Foundation Roi Baudouin, because we are hosted here by la Fondation Roi Baudouin. So many thanks. This is a place which is part of the history of Belgium, of the history of Brussels, and consequently of the history of Europe. And this place was part, or is part, of the Royal Palace. So we have a specific thanks to the royal family and to the King Baudouin Foundation. But also our different partners. So I just checked the list because I don't want to forget anybody. And as you noticed, I have not followed my speech at all. So EuropaNova, who is the operator of Conclave and de facto the first partner of it. The Foundation Bertelsmann, Blaise Strategic Forum, thanks Peter. Champalimo, which is a major European medicine and health foundation. Foundation Mercator and Reimagine Europa. Did I forget somebody with regard to the foundation? No. I want also to thank our business partner, Syensqo, Elskin, Bosqar, Titan, Vofi, Scale Up Europe, which is the Association of European Unicorn. And I want to take advantage of this moment to thank the European leaders who are contributing to the success of Conclave. Yesterday we had a workshop with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Prime Minister Alexander De Croo is going to conclude this conference. We will have also the presidency of the Council of the EU with the Sherpa of Prime Minister Tusk tonight. And of course, the presence and the contribution as a participant of Conclave of President Antonio Costa. And I want to say a special thanks to Antonio Costa because he was the person who made the first Conclave with Antonio Vitorino possible. And of course, I want to thank particularly the team behind the Conclave board, the chairman of the Conclave board, Art de Geus, the EuropaNova team, and its leader, DG Isabelle Négrier. That's all. I wish you a very fruitful day. I ask you to be free, to think out of the box, to challenge, but also to listen. And I think Europe needs to listen. And this first conference with remarkable speakers from Africa and Morocco in particular, Asia, I mean China and India, the US, so North America. I want to thank them also because they travel, and some of them just travel for the day and for this conference. So please applaud them, and thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. You know, listening to Guillaume, I realized that basically there is one undisputable fact about European Union which we all agree about, and this is we are really good at writing reports. We are really, really good at writing reports. But the implementation of these reports, well, this is something that needs to be discussed, but also needs to be viewed from the perspective of other global players and regions. Unfortunately, former President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, couldn't be with us. He's sending his regrets. So I propose that we jump right into the conversation with global actors, as Guillaume said, coming from Asia, Africa, India, China, and so on and so on. And it's my great pleasure to welcome on the stage Erika Staël von Holstein, who is the CEO of Reimagine Europe and is going to be hosting the first session with the title, A Respected Geopolitical Power. Are we? Please, Erika, the floor is yours.
Is this working? Is it working? Okay, wonderful. I'd like to invite the panelists to join me here whilst I give a brief introduction of this session. And first of all, I don't think there could be a more timely moment than having this conversation here today. We all know what's happening next week. And I think the point of this first international conference ahead of the Conclave has always been precisely that: how do we listen to what other people think about Europe, and how do they see Europe in the broader world, and how do they see the future and the world in general? I think we're always very focused on our own perspectives and our own point of view, and the whole point of this conference here tonight is maybe to make us a little bit uncomfortable, I hope so at least, but really to challenge maybe some of the assumptions and really think, where are we going in this very changing world? And I like to actually start by apologizing, because when I was a student, I was a bit disappointed in how boring politics was to some extent. Nothing was happening. Everything was going well, and we had the global world order and the international institutions, and all the political parties thought more or less the same. There was little differences, but it wasn't the exciting times that I was reading about in the history books and that I wanted to be part of. I regret that wish right now. Right now, I feel that I live in a Black Mirror episode. If somebody had told me 3 years ago that I was going to wake up in a world where there were talks about the US annexing Greenland, I would have started laughing and say, oh, really? And invading Canada is next on the list? And this is the reality we live in today. So I think we can clearly say that the logic of yesterday is gone. We don't know what the logic of tomorrow will be. And that's why I'm so pleased to have with me today the 3 fabulous speakers who will help us a little bit understand what is this logic of tomorrow? What are the potential perspectives? And we have from China, I'd like to welcome Dr. Henry Wang. Henry, please join me here at the table. Dr. Wang is founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization, which is a non-governmental think tank based in Beijing. He's also a former counselor to the China State Council and vice chairman of the China Association for International Cooperation. He's also a steering committee member of the Paris Peace Forum, a frequent speaker and writer about all these topics, and probably one of the best people to give us an insight into how is China seeing this dramatically shifting world. To come with a US perspective, we're very happy to welcome Mr. Martin Quencez, who is Managing Director and for Geopolitical Risk and Strategy at the German Marshall Fund. Martin, welcome. The German Marshall Fund, as you know, is a non-partisan American public policy think tank that seeks to promote cooperation and understanding between the EU and the US. He's also an associate researcher for the European Council on Foreign Relations, has taught at Sampo, and is also a frequent speaker and writer on many of these topics. So I think you will really be able to bridge the vision of the US in this very special time for America, with a new president being inaugurated just in a couple of days. And then to respond a little bit from the European perspective and give a little bit of a view of how can Europe respond to these challenges, we're delighted to have with us Nicolas Vinocur, who's based here in Brussels. He is French-American, but he's editor-at-large at Politico and fully involved in the insights of how these debates are issued here in Brussels. Nicolas? Ha, doing a fashionable entrance. Thank you very much, Nicolas. So there's a lot to talk about, and we only have less than 45 minutes because I've talked too much, and I promise I'm here to listen, so I will try to talk less. But I wanted to start with, and this is this changing vision of the world. I think, at least for my generation, the international order was quite clear. It was a rules-based order with key organizations and setup and things. The future looks much less certain. So I was interested to see, is this a kind of vision that you also see in other parts of the world? And in particular, I'd start to ask you, Henry, how are these changes perceived in China? How does China see the future and the future of the world order? And what part does Europe play in that future?
Great. Thank you, Erika, and also thank the organizer for this wonderful conference. So it's a really great honor to be here, to also with such a distinguished audience. I think the topic of we're having here is really very timely. EU and respective geopolitical power, absolutely, is very timely that we discuss this issue. You mentioned about next Monday we will have inaugural speech by elect President Trump, and so I see he has a really a grand plan this time. For example, 8 years ago when he was assumed his term first time, he really aimed at China, and then he launched the trade war right after he pursued presidency, and he launched a national strategic report which placed China as a strategic rival #1, basically. And I see EU followed on that as China as a systematic rivalry and all those things. So that narrative actually continues for 8 years. We're still seeing that today. And so you can see Biden followed what Trump has done. And there are so many companies being sanctioned on China. So I think that is not really healthy. After 8 years of doing that, you realize, China's still there. China's still resilient. China's trade with U.S. is actually gone up since Trump launched the trade war, and China and EU are both second largest trading partners among each other. But however, I see this time Trump have a much bigger plan now. He's not only raising tariff on China, he's raising tariff for 25% for Canada, for Mexico. He's talking about raising 10% for EU and probably the rest of the world. And also, he's even bigger on that. He's going to talk about merger Canada and, change the Mexican Gulf to American Gulf, and also talk about Greenland. And so you see, this time China may not be his #1 priority. He's even have a bigger plan, unified North America, and probably launching a bigger, gigantic master plan for the world. So I think, we're probably going to have a bumpy times ahead, with such a really, expansion mode of the current American incoming president. So I think it's important that EU, China, and probably Global South, the BRICS countries, we have to how to really reshape the global order and new governance system. We have a Bretton Woods system for 81 years now, and yet the unipolar war is gone, and the multipolar war is not really governance is not setting up. So I think it's important that China, EU, and the rest of the world, and also Global South and BRICS countries work together to really, keep the world in good shape and also find ways to collaborate. So I think this economic globalization and trade and all those WTO, all those climate change are really fundamental that we have to really stick together. So we have to prepare for uncertainty. I think China is probably ready, to if Trump wants to make deals, we can make deals. But importantly is that we're going to have a peace deal. We're going to have a prosperity deal. We're going to have a trade deal. We're not going to have ideological deals or the autocracy versus democracy, that kind of a ideological divide. We want to really see a pragmatic part of President Trump, which already has some of that. And he said if China and U.S. works together, they can solve any problem of the world. And also he's inviting President Xi to his inaugural ceremony. But I think China just announced today Vice President Han Zheng will be going to Washington to attend also his inaugural ceremony. And also China exciting the Executive Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang to Davos. Both were happening at the same time. So we're going to Davos after this. But I think, the war is much interesting to see what's going on, and we'll see what comes out. But I believe that China and EU has a huge interest to work together. We just had a Council President Antonio Costa talk to President Xi 2 days ago. They both re-emphasized this year is the 50th anniversary of China and EU diplomatic relations, and we have to really work together for the sake of the world and for the prosperity of the world. So I think that EU being one of the largest economy, and China and even US, we have to work together rather than expanding and disrupting and then chaotic situation. We can't afford that. So it's important we talk about this. So thank you.
Just one follow-up question on that, because I think this will be very interesting for our audience. We've seen a lot of moves these past years, especially with the BRIC countries of setting up new structures and new systems. Do you see that in this new multipolar order that you're talking about, that there will be a set of new institutions or continuation of the existing institutions? How is that viewed from a Chinese perspective?
Yeah, right. Actually, President Xi said the EU is an important polo of this multipolar. I mean, that's for sure. But I think, absolutely, the Global South, the BRICS countries are really getting together. The reason for that is they see the economic potential of this bloc, because China, for example, has a Belt and Road Initiative, has invested almost $1 trillion for 3,000 projects for all those global South countries. So I think that probably is making this BRICS attractive. And then also US has weaponized the dollar payment system, and also BRICS country wants to try to see if they can experiment some other payment system just to supplementary, what kind of a situation if they may have. But also, I think you talk about institutions. I think there's some emerging now. For example, you have AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, where most of European countries and most of the other countries are in it. It's a readily available tool, but also we have a new development bank, which is also from BRICS countries. But also, I think there's a consensus building among these BRICS countries. There's another 30 country lined up wants to join BRICS. So I think if the developing country, global South countries, if they're seeing the U.S. or maybe the traditional the unipolar world is not working, and then they want to see what can be done, and then they see there's a new momentum for the BRICS countries, and then they would like to join that, and they would like to support that for the economic benefit, rather than this geopolitical war and all those other things going on. And I think probably China represents a globalization forces that push for the economic globalization still there. And because China is the largest trading partner of 140 countries and contribute over 30% global GDP growth, and still maintain 5% GDP growth. So that's important for the world to really keep its pace. I think, in that sense, I think BRICS countries are doing some experiment, but they'd like to work with EU, US, many other countries. Only if they do not have the opportunity to work, and then they have to force to work on their own. So that's probably the situation.
Thank you very much. Then over to you, Martin, sort of the American perspective. So we're saying on Monday there's going to be a big change. How is this going to change the American perspective of the global world order or the future? And what's the role of Europe in this new vision?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you very much, Erika, and thank you for the invitation. Well, I'm supposed to talk for the US, but I'm not American myself, so just word of caveat here. I think one thing that we need to realize, looking at it from Europe, is the level of anger that exists in Washington, D.C., with the decisions that were made by previous American presidents and American administration that drives very much the foreign policy debate, that Donald Trump has won not by saying, I will repeat what some prestigious Republican president of the past has done, but pretty much by saying, I will change everything that has been done for the past 30 years. And that comes with the idea that the so-called US-led international order does not serve US interests anymore. What has been built after the Second World War, and perhaps even more after 1991, is not fit for the US power today. That often here in Europe we perceive as this US-led value-based or norms-based order is, in the Trump rhetoric, the very burden that prevents the US from truly experiencing its power. And so the point is to unravel what has been built. The point is to have a theory of change. And I think that the Trump administration coming next week will ask of Europe to participate in this change. The problem is that for DC, and that is true both of the Democrats and the Republicans, Europe is viewed as a status quo power. Europeans are interested in preserving the order because they see it as serving their own interests. And so if you are the Biden administration, and in many ways you also want to protect the order, you want to protect the rules, well, working with Europe makes sense. But if you want to unravel this order and you want to change it, then the Europeans become obstacles rather than partners. And I think that they very much want to have a discussion with Europeans on whether we're ready to change the rules and terms of that order. A lot of it has to do with the American analysis of their own relationship with China, in fact. And that predates Donald Trump. I mean, the pivot to Asia was what, 2011 under Obama. Americans under the Bush administration will remind Europeans that Angela Merkel in 2007 came to DC asking whether they could start working on a free trade agreement with the US on the basis that Merkel was very concerned of the economic implications of China's new influence at the global level. And so that's almost 20 years ago now. Trump is at the end of that process that took that time. And the last thing I just want to add is there is also in US foreign policy a deep anger still today for what happened under the Bush administration with regards to military intervention and the relation to the military tool. If you look at the number of US veterans that will join the next next Trump administration, from, well, J.D. Vance, obviously, but also Mike Waltz, Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, for that matter, they all agree on one thing, that the experience of the 2000 intervention in the Middle East was the greatest strategic mistake in US history. And I think that will guide a lot of what the Trump administration will want to do in the coming years. Rather than thinking in terms of isolationism versus liberal interventionism, this is not quite how I understand the debate. I think this is a relation between American citizens and their own history and the anger that drives that relation.
Thank you very much. And do you feel that this is shared by the public at large, so not only from the Trump administration, but also a broader American sentiment?
I'm always cautious, you know, when we look at polls in the US or either in Europe. I think that leaders do have the power to drive, to a certain extent, public opinion, and in the US as well. If tomorrow Donald Trump were to say, we need to have, you know, we need to start maximum pressure vis-a-vis Iran again, you probably see that a large majority of the Republican Party would support that policy. On the contrary, if the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself could said that actually it's time to look for some sort of a deal with Iran, the reverse would be true. So I'd be cautious. But the 2 points that I made before, the idea that the Bush years were great mistakes that cost dearly to the American people, and that the system doesn't work in the US advantage anymore, is indeed shared by a lot of the population, both on the left and on the right.
Thank you very much. So two quite different visions or narratives about where the future is going. So Nick, over to you. How do you see your position, given these two very different visions, and how would you respond to this, looking towards the future of where Europe is right now, and maybe what Europe also would need to think about in moving forward?
Thanks, and I'll be speaking as an American to describe the European perspective, but I'm half European, so shouldn't be totally illegitimate. I think, you know, the past few months in Europe have been trying to imagine what this second Trump administration is going to be like. Frank just described to me as Jaws 2, bigger, meaner, more teeth is a lot of what you get from it. And some people saying, no, actually, Trump is going to be more, he's going to have learned and kind of become domesticated. I think what's really revealing about it is the sort of slightly passive stance that we've collectively had here in Europe, where you know, even now, the inauguration is going to happen in just a couple of days. The words you hear most frequently around Brussels are, well, we have to wait and see what he's going to do. You know, he could hit us with 100% tariffs on, you know, day one, but let's not anticipate anything. And moreover, let's not provoke, let's not endanger this relationship. So there's a lot of talk, and I think we in Europe are great at conceptualizing things and imagining every possible scenario, but there's much more difficulty to sort of move in a particular policy direction. And I think, frankly, the past week or 10 days have been pretty illustrative of that dynamic as well. You know, you had the administration's not sworn in yet, but they're already going gangbusters, and we had the sort of surprising remarks about Greenland, and we had Elon Musk, you know, reaching into our elections in the UK and in Germany and who knows where else. And I think the response in EU policy circles has been, I would say, if we're going to be charitable, I would say it's a response of watchful sort of waiting, and if I want to be less charitable, I would say it's one of paralysis, basically, where we have not really, haven't really decided on a way to respond to this kind of rhetoric. And we did have 4 years of experience with it. During the first Trump administration, we did have certain people who could kind of come up to the microphone and say things that seemed to represent everybody, but now we really have a problem of not having that, of not having spokespeople and representatives who are empowered to say what we sort of think together. So as we sort of look forward, I think Europe talks about itself as a geopolitical power. We want to make the EU stronger, more unified, more integrated. We had a campaign where we I've exhausted the microphone, sorry. We want to, and we had a campaign where we re-elected our president, Ursula von der Leyen. So there's a lot of desire to, I'm really putting them all to sleep. I'll just hold it like this. To have the trappings of power, essentially, have the sort of geopolitical power. We want to be a geopolitical power, and I think all that is great, but we haven't caught up to it in other ways. And my sense is that, well, if you want to deal with this administration and you want to be respected, have a decent position at the negotiating table, it's important to sort of change some of the rhetorical habits and kind of lose your fear in a way. We talk a lot here amongst ourselves about all of Europe's attributes, what great companies we have, 500 million highly skilled workers, biggest market in the world. Well, we should start speaking that way and being less afraid of how the United States is going to react and more concerned about getting to a good negotiating position with the U.S. administration, because they're already coming at Europe very hard. I mean, you kind of couldn't imagine something more provocative than to say, we're just going to take a piece of territory that you consider to be yours. So, and I don't mean that the EU needs to be bellicose, provocative. I mean, it needs to get a little bit more swagger. And I think that will help start things off much better.
Well, thank you. That will be some food for thought. It's not always what how we prefer to I would say, position ourselves. And I think that is something that Europe always tends to do, having worked in these circles for a long time, is we always start with complaining and looking at what we do badly and how much worse we are than everyone else at certain elements. But the title that we are discussing today, and I think this is very, very important, is obviously, is Europe a respected geopolitical power? And this word power is, I think, transitioning a little bit in today's world, because we're already trying to adapt to a digital world, and we've seen the shocks that have brought to the system. And now we have AI and soon quantum computing. How do you think that this will shift the concept of power? You mentioned also Elon Musk in the US, and there's a big difference there coming up, and we're seeing all the Silicon Valley giants rallying up behind the president-elect. How will power shift, in your opinion, in the 21st century?
Yeah, thank you, Erika. Excellent question. I think that we are really in a huge transformation. You know, we just passed the first quarter of the 21st century. We are starting the other two-thirds quarter of the 21st century now. But the world has really changed dramatically. I think with the AI, with the quantum computing, as you said, but also with this big geopolitical landscape is really shaping our world now. So what I see is that for the AI, for example, we have AI for example, in China has become a very hot topic now. Everybody was talking about that, and then people are using a lot of AI tools, computing powers, and this is not something in theory, it's in practice. So of course, US is still the biggest one, but China is really quickly catching up a bit on that as well in terms of AI talent. China produces a lot of that, but I think that the AI is not regulated. There's no global governance for that. That's why I think the French ambassador in Beijing and also German ambassador in Beijing come to me, and we organized the China-EU AI summit there in my think tank. Talk about how in the future to regulate the AI. Where I think EU is a power in terms of regulation, in terms of come up with new ideas. We just had another AI seminar with a European, Brussels-based CERE, which is a European think tank regulator program. 2 days ago, it's on YouTube now. But I think this is such a big subject, and also the war is left behind in the global south. Without AI, education, in hospitals, in Medicare, in many automation, EV cars and all those things will be left behind. So you see a big gap with people country has AI power and without AI power. So that and also you see the future war is basically fighting on the AI on drones now. So what I think just to conclude my talk is that. I think European and US and China still has many things, this G3 has to work together. And I see Elon Musk, you mentioned about Elon Musk has a business background. He has, Tesla actually sold about 685,000 EV cars in China, 8.8% growth this year than last year. So Elon Musk knows how China effective, and same for the Tim Cook. He's a good friend of Trump, and Apple produce 90% of Apple products in China. There's no national security issue. Everybody's using an Apple phone from China, but there's no national security issue. See, so there's many things happening. And Stu Schwarzman, who founded the Tsinghua Schwarzman College, was Trump's first advisory council chairman. So I see Trump is surrounded by a number of good business, common sense businessmen now, including he appointed an ambassador to China. Was another 4 decades of a businessman, multinational CEO, and worked in China. So I think that probably we'll see more common sense coming back. And those hawkish people around Trump is different than the first term. Is much more loyal now than the first term. So probably Trump's appetite is now bigger. He's talking about whole North America and Greenland, and we're talking about getting some of the Europe. So I don't know. I mean, he always making big shifts. So we'll have to see what's next.
And Martha, over to you. How do you think that AI and these new technologies might impact how we think about power?
Well, in the US case, obviously AI is viewed as a way to preserve US supremacy. I think that the Trump administration in that way is slightly different from the Biden administration in that they're not that happy about talking, but managing the competition with China. They're saying we want to win the competition with China. And they see new technologies as being the main factors for that victory. So there will be an attempt at building on that competitive advantage, and I think that Europe will be the main target of that policy for the US. trying to make sure, because what's interesting is that if you listen to US officials, again, Democrats as Republicans, they'll all tell you, we don't want to decouple, right? It's not about Cold War 2.0, it's not about a US-led world versus a China-led world. But the policies lead to that decoupling. And the tech as well, in itself. You have a concentration of technology that makes it more and more difficult to have one leg in one world and another leg in the other. In the defense sector, it's obvious. You know, interoperability means that if you acquire a certain type of system, you can't actually operate other types. And I think that we should listen a bit less about what they have to say about decoupling and look at the implications of what they're doing in the technological sector. And my concern is that with Trump being quite open about seeing the world in terms of spheres of influence, and you know, Greenland and Panama and Canada obviously belong to the US sphere of influence, that will fit nicely with a sort of US-led technological world versus a China-led one. And I think that Europe will be very much, in a way, with the Trump administration, it was true of the first Trump administration as well. First, target your allies. Then you turn to your adversaries and competitors. So I'm not surprised that the first remarks are targeting Canada or Denmark. But we are the prey in that competition.
Thank you. And maybe, Nick, over to you. AI and the whole digital sphere has obviously had a huge impact also on foreign interference, misinformation, and all of these issues. And in general, the weaponization of the media world. So the role of conquering the mind as part of a geopolitical strategy. As somebody who is editor-at-large at a big Brussels media, how do you see that impact, and how do you see this battle for the narrative of the future building up in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important, really central to kind of democracy and even to sort of any notion of European power. So in a previous life, I was the technology editor around 2018. We had a very different conversation. It was Russian disinformation had brought us Donald Trump, and it was a kind of naive stage of looking at how social media worked. And we were going to get our strategic adversaries, we're going to flood the social networks with disinformation to divide us and to weaken us. That was kind of, social media 1.0. Now we're in this new phase where, Elon Musk has bought the most important sort of information marketplace in the world. We created a piece of legislation to deal with disinformation, but we were not prepared for this scenario where the #1 disinformer in the world was going to be the owner of this platform, and that if you want to regulate it, well, that means you're picking a fight with him. And oh, I forgot to mention, he's also in the US administration. So I think the idea of sort of digital sovereignty, and also just, another comment is, we used to say, well, that's just happening online. Oh, he's just saying something online, and that's not what the real world is. I think social media 2.0 is, internet is real life. And what happens on the internet is happening in real life. And anyone who wants to underestimate the influence of Elon Musk on European politics, I say, just look at the UK. The Prime Minister spent 5 minutes of his press conference reminding everyone of his position about the grooming gangs, a story which was 10 years older. 5 minutes of live TV time he used to justify himself to a story that Elon Musk had brought up. And now we hear that there's a national inquiry being launched into this subject in the UK. So he has effectively put it on the table. And X is actually something we'd never imagined. We have laws to regulate our elections nationally, which say that, well, I get equal speaking time with Mr. Martin and equal speaking time with Mr. Huiyao. It's all very polite and nice. We never thought of a situation where, well, there's one platform where everything is being debated and you have no influence over it whatsoever. And I think this is part of what I was saying about the EU becoming more comfortable with power, becoming more comfortable with kind of asserting its rights. Other countries have taken action against this when they felt that there was undue interference. Brazil has shut down X. China certainly doesn't allow it. And you know, here in Europe, well, we kind of have a very sort of wait and see attitude with, well, you know, let's just hold on and you know, let's wait till the next election. You know, let's hope nothing goes wrong there. I think you know, this is going to be a real test for the EU. We created a law specifically to deal with this, which is on the books, which is now ratified, been passed by every country in the EU. Are you going to use it or not in this case? And I think there's a great trepidation. There's a great trepidation in this town about how do we use our power? How far do we go? Where are the sort of levers? And also not to provoke a backlash that we don't want. If we go after X, are we going to get hit harder on trade? Are we going to suffer other consequences? I think we got to overcome that. But I would say one just last thought is part of the problem is a deficit of information. I noticed people really interested what you have to say coming back from Washington, because I'm not sure people here have direct contact with Trump world and the people around Donald Trump. And I frankly don't think that our leaders, Ursula von der Leyen, I don't think they have excellent contacts in Trump world. And part of it is, well, we just don't really know what they're going to do and what they really think. And that also contributes to the trepidation, paralysis, fear, inability to act intelligently, gauging how they'll respond and react.
Thank you. So the need to think more strategically about the critical infrastructure, which is our media environment and how we influence how we think, but also to listen better, to learn how to listen to different narratives and perspectives and views. I can hear now that they're starting to prepare the coffee and we stand between everyone and the coffee, but I'd like to, as a little bit of an inspiration for the coffee break, I mentioned a black mirror before, so I'd like to ask all of you to enter into that world. And when you are coming back here in 5 years' time, because this is a community, as Guillaume very well said, so we hope to see you back to share, where do you think we will be? How do you think, if you can imagine a vision 5 years from now, I mean, if somebody would have told me that what is happening now would have happened 5 years ago, I would not have believed them. So if we can really try to be a bit uncomfortable out of the box, how do you see, what are we going to be discussing in 5 years' time? Henry?
Yeah, I think it's great to have a 5 years plan. Basically, that was China doing every 5 years. But my guess is that by the time, 2030, 5 years later, we will see probably more really multipolar world will really taking shape. EU being a very important polo, probably China and of course US. So we need to find a better way to work together, including India and many other countries too. So in that sense, I see EU play more mediating roles, be more facilitating. And then at that time, we're not really divided by East and West. We're not divided by autocracy and democracy. We're more divided by, inequality, climate disparity, and also, rich and poor gap, and global north and south. So that kind of a deepening, widening gap there. So we need, all those developed, more advanced countries to work together. So I think EU probably has a greater responsibility to glue China, US, and Japan and many others to work together. India, of course. So I see EU have a lot of enormous soft power and a great tradition and a great heritage to really, bring the works together. So I would see, of course, there's a bit of rivalry between China, US. But let's emphasize on the collaboration. So I don't think EU should follow US all the time. If US says strategic rivalry and EU will say systematic rivalry with China, And that doesn't really work. I still see there's a lot of prosperity, more colorful, more diversified world that China, EU can work together, particularly for the multilateralism. You know, that's where we are shaking, and the world is really clumsy on that now. And we see the unilateralism, expansionist mood thriving again. And we have to work together to really bring people back to the, you know, the global order that we have been established since the Second World War. And we should not rock the boat and redesign the map of the world. And we have to stop that. We have to really work together to really not let that happen. So I think, well, people talk about China expanding and expansionist, and I think China never, you know, China is always surrounded by the Great Wall, and they never actually colonized or invaded any other countries for thousands of years. China is really agriculture-based country, and that is really how they want to continue to be. And so I think we probably have to tolerate a bit more different system, and then really maintain the order of the world, largely for the benefit of mankind.
Well, thank you very much for giving us some hope that there is a possibility out there that is peaceful and not completely dystopian and focusing on shared problems as opposed to this new aggressive point. Martin, do you agree, or do you think we'll sit and discuss something very different in 5 years?
I mean, you know, I'm probably a bit more pessimistic. I hope. I mean, I wonder if we're still going to talk about Trump in 5 years. Who knows? I think in a way, most of the discussion will remain the same. We'll still be in a transition period from one order to the next. I don't think that it will take less than 5 years for the international order to resettle under completely new rules. We're definitely not going back to 1997. This is gone. But it may take a bit more, few years of instability before we feel like there's a new stable order. I feel like the question of tech and climate change will stay with us for more than 5 years. I would just say that I hope that the next 4 years under the Trump administration will not see more divisions within Europe. I have great doubts that the shock that we'll present to ourselves with the Trump administration will create a sort of rally around the flag effect in Europe. I don't see that happening. I think that we may face more divisions, and that is something of concern for me.
So we have two visions of change. One, a vision of change, but more collaboration. A vision of change, unfortunately, probably more fragmentation. And Nick, what is your vision what will we be discussing in 5 years?
Yeah, I think just a couple of kind of thoughts. I think I've thought about the transatlantic relationship and how that's changing. And I think we're going to be in something what I call the age of maturity, basically, where what we're seeing now, which is the sort of rearming of Europe, the kind of Europe growing as a geopolitical power, I think that's a deep trend. And I think we're going to see a more defense-focused, a sort of more muscular Europe emerging. And a lot of people will say, how can you say that? The far right is growing, they're Eurosceptic. I would say, look at what's really happened. No country has left the EU since the UK left. We're going to have someone very right-wing coming into power in Austria. I will bet you anything you want that Austria will never leave the European Union. On a very fundamental level, countries are using the EU more and more. The way it's been described to me is that the morality is leaving the story, basically. It's becoming a much more pragmatic relationship. And one place where we're going to see the EU behave more geopolitically, more muscular, is in defending its own borders. And that's something where there's an extremely concrete, visible, with Frontex, with the insistence and the fight against irregular migration is going to be one actual way that the EU is going to emerge as kind of more of a hard power presence in the world. And I think, with technology and all that stuff, very difficult. I think we'll probably maintain, it will be a more mature relationship with the U.S., less of a kind of what do we call it, vassal or that kind of relationship. I think the EU will probably try to maintain its equidistance on China and not follow fully the United States lead on China policy. And then I think on AI and on information, I think that's really the Wild West. But I do think that we're coming out of a long phase of experimentation with social media being seen as a good for society. The idea that the more you say open circulation of ideas is a pure positive, I think that's a 20-year trend that is probably going to end, and I think we're going to see more efforts to control narratives, including in the West, essentially. That, you know, what's going on X is not that different from the way algorithms are controlled in China as well, in that we're going to boost certain things and deboost other things. And I think that's, you know, 15 years ago, people would talk about blogging and say, well, this is incredible, it's a revolution, free circulation of ideas. I think we're going to become more cynical about it, and we're going to see more efforts to kind of control and channel this and see it as an instrument of power and sort of framing political debates. But yeah, that's as far as I'll go.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask all of you to join me and thank the panelists who have given us more optimistic ideas than I feared. Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Erika and the panelists. I think we really enjoyed the discussion. Although, you know, it's not like I'm going to sleep very peacefully tonight based on the debate, especially what Martin said, you know, now is the time when there are forces who would like to unravel what was built. I think this is really nicely put. It summons, you know, what we are actually facing in the next months and years. But how can you build something from nothing? I think this is a bigger and more important question, and this is why, you know, it's my pleasure to introduce the next two speakers who are going to do, as we call it, the wake-up call from business society to European Union, and they are going to speak about how we can improve on competitiveness to actually maintain our power in this new geostrategic reality. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Stjepan Oreskovic. He's not just professor, but also a majority shareholder of Bosqar Invest, and Jorn Fleck, Senior Director from the Atlantic Council. Please, Jorn, Stjepan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and to EuropaNova and the partners of the Conclave for having us and for organizing this conference. I think we already heard in the first session, you know, a discussion of geopolitics and how it's really inseparable from geoeconomics, from technology issues, from the decarbonization agenda that we're all aware of, and that we've been reminded so brutally over the last few years of how inseparable these two areas are. And so we wanted to use this wake-up call conversation to really explore and discuss the European Union's competitiveness challenges, crisis, and what to do about it, right? Not just lament the challenges, but actually look at the action agenda that, for example, the report by Mario Draghi that everyone here will be plenty aware of set out. And that report really was a stark reminder of what it called this existential challenge that Europe faces from its declining economic and productivity growth, from vast underinvestment in key areas of the economy, from its lagging behind in the fourth industrial revolution in technology development and adoption. And there's obviously that call for action from Draghi. And so delighted to be here with my partner and friend, Stjepan Oreskovic, who is also a member of the European Academy of Sciences. Obviously the... And arts, not to forget. And the founder and majority stake shareholder of Bosqar Investment. Anyone who knows Stjepan knows he's a very rare blend of an entrepreneur, a scientist, an innovator, an investor, and a business leader, and somewhat of an iconoclast, if I can say that. And anyone who knows him also knows we will get one of the nicest and simultaneously sharpest wake-up calls you will ever get. So I want to jump right in, and my question to you is, with that background that you have in business, in entrepreneurship, in science and technology, what is your assessment of the challenges that Draghi sets out, of the Draghi report's problem statement, and is it enough of a wake-up call to the point of our session?
Yeah, thank you, especially for this iconoclast. This is what Bulgarians put in the church when you are dead.
Mike.
But Draghi report, you know how I see it, it reminds me on the atmosphere in Europe, you know, this famous Ray Charles song, It's Crying Time Again. So, it's really hard to listen this crying, especially when you look around the world and see people living in nations and locations where everything is destroyed and nothing exists and they are not crying. So what I feel like about Draghi report, this will be probably together with Leta and Huiyao and other reports, something that probably Ursula von der Leyen will be most proud of once she leaves the office, although she thinks she will never leave, because every politician never thinks they will leave. But this is very important, because when you see how it was prepared, it's almost 300 different important intellectuals working on that. A lot of institutions, think tanks, banks, and even, you know, Darren Acemoglu, very famous, excellent economists. And when you see what the report says, and I read it several times, I would even buy it if it wouldn't be available for free. It's a high-quality document, because with this document, the story about what is the situation, where we are, where should we go, what should be done with competitiveness is over. Anyone who is serious, and with unserious people, I don't want to talk. If someone wants to bring serious arguments against what says in the Draghi report, it will have a lot of difficulties. So it's a huge step ahead as compared to superficial political narratives and, I would say, approach to not only past, not only reality, but also to the future.
So a huge step ahead. In a rare moment of talking about yourself, you shared with me a little while ago that if someone had invested in Bosqar Group 5 years ago, they would have had a 640% return. So with that success in investment, investor choices in mind, if we turned European competitiveness efforts into a fund you could invest in, would you? Would you invest in that? Would you bet on the EU's economic competitiveness?
No. I wouldn't buy shares of EU. It's not question whether the report is good. But as an investor, if I would give this pitch for the investment and look into what Draghi and the team are offering, look, I would ask myself the following question, which I always ask when we make an acquisition. We made 57 in 5 years. what will be the return on investment? And if you talk about competitiveness, it's very simple. What is the return on investment of the competitors? And we want to compete with whom? With US. So I was looking in the historical data, what you see, that market capitalization in US of the leading sectors has been growing 20 times in the same time. Revenue growth, 9.5. So that's the benchmark for the investment. If you want to say, I want to be competitive with this guy, then your market cap should go 22. So I was looking into the mechanisms that would give me an assurance of whether this return on investment will happen with Draghi's report. And so what you see there is, or maybe even better, what is missing. I'm so sorry that Professor Mazzucato is not here today, and also Danny Roderick would be even very much welcome. What is missing is industrial policy. I always look at profile and psychology and history and career of the people that are saying, doing, or writing something. So the Draghi team and all the professors and institutions inside, they can only produce exactly what they did. And this is very good understanding of capital markets, very good understanding of technologies or competitiveness, but not understanding of industrial policy. There are some other guys that understand what kind of industrial policy works well. And there are a lot of good groups, I mentioned few, that were really careful in looking what industrial policy worked in last few decades. And we know the answers. And so what would be the next step if being in the European Commission is, let's hire another group that will help us defining industrial policy that works. That means entrepreneurial state, embedded investment, nudge toward what you want to get from the investment, and so on. And this is, I think, the next step. We should not stop here with the strategy. Now we have to move towards the next level, which is industrial policy, and not all industrial policies are efficient. We have a lot of evidence. Economic science is progressing. We know examples from Taiwan, from UK, from US. We know DARPA, we know AstraZeneca, and many case studies, many stories which really show how the things can work and which don't work. So my advice would be, don't stop here now. Go next, because in Europe, you know, I was listening to Leonard Cohen a few days ago, and he reminded me on European Commission and European bureaucracy. One of the last songs he wrote is Different Sides. And he says, please kiss me and stop writing everything. We should start really, stop writing everything and start doing it the next step.
So action time. You refer to sort of a new type or different type of industrial policy that should be informed by a focus on innovators, entrepreneurs. Can you expand on that? What exactly would that look like?
You know, that's the third level. You know, we in Europe, we tend to talk about things without subject. Americans, they always have a subject. So nothing happens without the subject. Who is the subject of change? Science, scientists, and entrepreneurs. And so if you would look into profile of the leading entrepreneurs in Europe now, let's do the study. You will see everything what you will immediately know, I won't say loudly. And if you look into these guys that were just discussed in the previous fantastic roundtable, you will see other type. So there is a fantastic article from Jean Tirole from 1982, and the title is Fat Cats, Puppy Dogs, and Lean Angry Young Men. so you understand what I want to say.
So spell it out for us.
We are feeding puppy dogs and fat cats. And we have to find lean and hungry young men. This is the dialogue between Julius Caesar from Shakespeare. He says, "Look, I'm worried about this Cassius. Who looks nervous and he is hungry. Bring me fat guys around myself." And you know, Europe is financing fat guys. If US will be doing the same thing Europe is doing, we'll have not Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos and other guys. Let me not say everything what I think about them, but we'll have General Motors and other car industry here. We missed two, and that's what Draghi clearly says, but we need to find these hungry guys, the third generation.
So some might wonder why we have us up on the screens, because we are also partners in crime in a special project that tries to leverage exactly that young and hungry, I would say, men and women entrepreneurs and innovators.
When I say guys, you know, I mean women.
So tell the audience a little bit and help people connect the dots between that project and the agenda we just talked about, the topics, the challenges we just talked about.
Look, I'll start from the film, the picture. I always try to have a picture. If I don't have it, it doesn't work. So try to imagine a room with 500 of these hungry guys. That's what we want to do. We want to assemble 500 is symbolic because we want to have a metaphor from Fortune 500. This will be future 500. And what we want is to bring not startups. All respect, but I'm a bit sick about startups. There are guys that are specialized in generating startups to collect money from public funds and nothing happened later. The problem of Europe is scale up. And that's what Draghi report says also well. We need to identify symbolically 500 companies that have potential for scale up. And then make them global players. And Europe don't know how to do it. And there are many reasons, and again, a report says why. But we need to bring them together to one room. We need to bring them venture capital. We need to bring them coaching, education, connections, everything what we can bring together, and we'll try to. And I know from example of our group how to scale up things. We know how to buy and build, and we want to see how we can help this group to identify talents and products and technologies, not trying to do the same things Americans already did, but the next generation. And I think, you know, we started with crying time. So let me end with something else. You are German, and
nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect, and you know, it reminds me on one big German. We really have a huge credit. He was born and living in Königsberg. Immanuel Kant. He wrote, one of his last articles was about French Revolution. And what was his message is, this will be a great thing. And you know what was his argument? He said, I feel the optimism. There is a huge optimism about French Revolution. So if we don't create optimism, and optimism comes through these people, they are optimistic, you know. I can't be optimistic, you know. I'm looking for, you know, a nice place to rest. So we need a new generation of people that are doing things that have potential, and then put all instruments of Europe in favor of supporting them, and do everything what Draghi says, with financial markets, with scale-ups and everything, but there is no competition without competitors.
Thank you, Stjepan. That's all the time we have. And I didn't promise you too much. We went from Ray Charles to Shakespeare and Julius Caesar to Immanuel Kant. I think 15 minutes, you can't do much better.
But I must say that working with Jorn and Maya and people from Atlantic Council is an excellent experience, because at the end, you know, everything fails on egos and characters, and also everything succeeds. So it's a huge pleasure.
Thank you. I hope everyone enjoys the coffee break. Thank you again for having us, and look forward to the rest of the conversations.
Thank you very much, Jorn. Thank you very much, Stjepan. Since this wake-up call was so forceful, I decided we are going to scrap the coffee break and just continue, because what Stjepan and Jorn explained is going from just writing the reports to actually implementing them. And I think this is something that needs to be done sooner rather than later. Now we have a coffee break for half an hour, and we are returning here at 4 sharp. Thank you very much. Okay. I think we are all set, and you know how you know that the conference is going well? If people don't leave after the coffee break. So, no, trust me, I'm doing conferences for a long time, and after a coffee break, usually people tend to go away. But not this time, which means that you found it interesting enough to stay with us also for these late afternoon sessions, which I think are going to be very, very interesting and challenging. We heard in the first panel views from China and the US. Now it's time to hear the views from India and from Africa, specifically from Morocco. So it's my great pleasure to invite to the floor the moderator of this panel, Ms. Maria Gabriel, who is a former foreign minister of Bulgaria and also a former European Commissioner. Maria, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. As you said, after US and China, now for the next session, we would like really to see how the EU is perceived from the point of view of India and Asia and from Morocco and Africa. I think that the first wake-up call finished with the sentence, there is no competition without competitors. So the question is the EU considered as competitor or trusted partner or something else? I have the pleasure now to invite first Dr. Gautam Shikharman, Vice President at Observer Research Foundation from India, to join me on stage. And I would also like to invite Dr. Abdelmalik Alaoui, President of Institut Marocain de l'Intelligence Stratégique, founding CEO of Gepard Group and best-selling author. Thank you very much. Well, first I would like to ask Dr. Shikharman, We know that your areas of research are grand strategy, economics, and foreign policy. By the way, I must say that I'm very proud that we have two very famous authors. Their books are read everywhere and for many, many people. But it will be really good, Dr. Schickerman, you talk about the new energy across India, but it's also, I see a link with this panel, a new energy across the continents. And within this new energy, how it's perceived, the European Union, from the point of view of India and Asia, as a competitor or trusted partner. I think that also it's important when we talk about competitor to say, is considered competitor by whom, what are the countries, and what are the strategic areas that will see competition, or on the other side, if it is a trusted partner, what are the challenges, what are the strengths and the weaknesses. So, Dr. Schickerman, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a clarification, I'm not a doctor, I'm a simple mister, very uneducated in this great gathering here. Delighted to be here, thank you very much. I think EU is more of a trusted partner, but let me elaborate. Trust between two geographies or two nations comes from 3 or 4 parts. The first is G to G, government to government. And over the past two years, ever since the EC had said that we want to sign an FTA, several member countries of EU have come, and we host them at Observer Research Foundation. And the underlying or the unsaid or the most dominant but quiet discussion is what's happening with the FTA. I don't think FTAs happen where there is no trust. Last month I had hosted the Portuguese foreign minister, and he didn't talk about India-Portugal relations. He talked about India-EU relations, and they were based on signing an FTA. Not only EU, I think across the world, every ambassador that I meet and every foreign minister who comes to India, FTA, everybody seems to want to sign an FTA with India. Sometimes I wonder why, but nonetheless, that's true. So I think there is a huge element of trust, and you don't open up your economies through an FTA. I mean, it's both are open economies, but an FTA sort of legitimizes it and strengthens it, unless there is an underlying trust between the two partners. So at a G2G level, government to government level, I think there is huge trust. It can be better, but it's there. At a B2B level, companies to companies, I find all the top companies from Europe very well established in India. Siemens from Germany, UPM from Finland, IKEA from Sweden, Alstom from France. I could go on. And they have long relationships, and they have been growing more and more. Offices are opening, more and more investment is coming from European companies. In fact, I would go to the extent to say that today it's very difficult to become a CEO if you don't have a China and an India exposure in your portfolio. So I see a lot of expats also coming to India and getting that experience of an emerging economy. At the third level, I see a C2C relationship, which is citizen to citizen. And here I find that this is the strongest relationship among the 3 that I've just talked about right now. We have about 80,000 Indian students in the European Union studying today. We had 4 million tourists that had come to the European Union member countries in 2019. After that, it fell. Today, it's at near half. But I would suspect that it's more due to your exasperating visa procedures than an element of trust. And on the other side, I see a lot of expats coming to India and engaging with us in various think tanks, in universities, in tourism, at the Kumbh Mela, which is going on right now, which is the world's largest gathering of Hindu religious people. I think there are hundreds and thousands of people from every country of Europe, America, even Asia, that have congregated there. So I think the C2C is the strongest part. There is one part which is missing. Unfortunately, it's the tail which is wagging the dog, and that is the media. Somehow, at the media level, I find, firstly, the European media has lost credibility in my mind and in several of us minds, because they somehow use us to push their own narrative in order to give some sort of a balanced approach, which is untrue. And I think there is something strange going on with the media. It's led by ideological persuasions. It is led by political definitions. I don't know what, but somehow they are not able to read India accurately most of the time. They are lecturing us all the time. They are moralizing. And that somehow, when it goes up into G2G, it seems as though the European Union as an entity, as a cohesive G2G, companies, people, media, it comes around as though it is not in the business of geopolitics, but it's in the business of geoshemitics. It's shaming every other country all the time. It is trying to show how ideologically right they are, how morally up they are. And I think this is that the part that you mentioned that needs to be fixed. And I mean, apologies. I know Chatham House doesn't apply here, but I can't help myself. So among these four, I think media is the weakest link, and people to people is the strongest link. Going forward, I see business becoming stronger, and finally, the government to government.
Very good, thank you very much. I think that it's quite clear what is the strongest and the weakest part, but you said it also, EU is all these levels, so if we need really to fix rapidly something, you already mentioned media, but how we can rebalance this? And my question is, do you consider EU as a whole when you say that there is this moralizing speeches or this attitude? Because on bilateral level, I don't think that it's exactly what we see on the ground.
You know, there are some member states...
A little bit provocative, yeah.
There are some member states of EU that are still buying Russian gas. You know that, right? And all we heard for the last 2 years is that India is financing Russia's war against Ukraine. Put these two together. Find out who said what and when and who is saying this today, and you will get your answer in terms of the moralizing part that I was saying. But forget about India for a while, okay? Let's just look at EU as an entity. I think it is time for EU to remind itself of its past glory and wake up from its strategic slumber that it has unconsciously fallen into. I think in the pursuit of, look, you've made great institutions. You've made a great geography. Each country is worth coming through. There are so many things to learn. You have given so many public goods to the world. You have created all of that. But over the past 1 or 2 decades, there has been stagnancy, economic stagnancy, knowledge stagnancy, business stagnancy, which in the previous session he mentioned. And I think for that, you made a good point, sir, that the 500 part. I think that's the prod that EU needs to get out of its strategic slumber. And it doesn't have to be economic alone. It has to be defense. It has to be foreign affairs. It has to be able to visualize, for instance, when we come back to India, that the India of today is a $4 trillion economy going on 10 trillion. Are you going to talk about the per capita income, which is 1/4 of your 3 poorest nations? Or are you going to look at a country which is looking at a $10 trillion economic powerhouse, which is having major stakes, the world's largest, most populated, and the youngest, and the fastest growing? These are the issues that EU needs to, at all 4 levels. Forget the media, I don't care anymore. But government, companies, and individuals, this is what EU needs to do. Get back on your feet. We are waiting for you to come back.
Thank you. And you also mentioned trust as a key word. If you'd like really to be a trusted partner, what are the key policy areas where you can see that we can further develop this partnership, how to strengthen it. But I'm saying not only as general terms, it's something that is concrete from your point of view, and maybe for us it's not so obvious.
Okay, let's take the previous discussion on Donald Trump. From what I have read, he wants to impose a 5% charge of GDP on EU for its security. Let's say you agree to 3% or 2%, as he said so in the previous term. And that would mean allocating money to things like defense, armed forces, technology, drones, and so on. So one way would be to import those equipment from United States or other countries. By the way, even India exports defense equipment now. Or the other would be to merge the strategic and defense interests into the economic affairs, set up plants in a place like India. I'm not saying only India, but in a place like India, where you get economies of scale, you get the workforce to deliver it, make it, bring it back, or export it, or use it, or do whatever. So I think this whole alignment of Trump is charging us, he wants us to pay 5%, and then getting bogged down by it can be seen and must be seen as an opportunity to get out of some of your recessionary members. And look at it not as a 1 year or a 2 year or a 4 year plan, but look at it as not a decoupling, but an independence from the influence of other countries, including the United States, and standing on your own feet strategically.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I'd like really to pass to the second panelist, Dr. Abdelmalek Alaoui. Well, I would like also to start with the same first general question, how from the point of view of Africa and particularly Morocco is seeing the EU as a competitor or trusted partners, and again, what are maybe the lessons learned from the past and how not to repeat the same errors, and what are also the main strategic areas in which we can build a trusted partnership.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thanks to the organizers for having me. It's a great honor. I'm not sure they will be completely pleased when I finish my intervention, but I'll try anyway. In the spirit of full disclosure, first, I'm not a doctor. My mom would have loved to, but unfortunately I'm not. And the second thing is that I have prepared, or to be more frank, my team asked ChatGPT what good answers I could provide to this audience to make me look smart and stuff. But in the spirit of continuing on what's happening in the morning and entering the business of slaughtering sacred cows, I have the daunting task of speaking on behalf of 50% of the Global South. You know, this 50% who knows how to play football and sucks at badminton. So basically the Africans and Latin America. And to answer in a very straightforward manner your question, is the EU a trusted partner or a competitor? I would say the short answer is neither. In the global geopolitics of Tinder, I would say we are in a long-distance relationship with Europe. This relationship is asymmetric. One party keeps on giving us unsolicited advice all the time on a wide range of topics, going from energy to technology to democracy to justice to trade to everything. And we just want to grow and we want to date other people. We want to date Asians, we want to go global, we want to do a lot of stuff. And the deep reason for this change and what's happening between right now the Global South and south of the Mediterranean and Europe is that we are just recovering from severe post-colonial syndrome. So now we can think by ourselves. We don't need you guys to send us experts from Brussels to show us how to take care of our accounting, because we're better at accounting and managing public finances now in the South than you are in Europe. And the second thing is that Europe has become, for us, a beacon, an icon of double standards. let me ask you a very simple question. You guys are being bullied by a car maker, a guy that makes electric cars. If his name was not Elon Musk, but Elon Moskovskaya, and he was Russian, what would Europe have done? Immediate ban on every Tesla car. Immediate. 10 minutes after he tweeted. You would have frozen his assets. You know that. Everybody knows that in this room. And we look at this because now we have the intellectual tools to look at this and say, these guys are inconsistent. And what they've been telling us for years is basically bullshit. Because they want to do stuff like green hydrogen. Let's take very concrete examples. You guys cannot develop green hydrogen in Europe because you have NGOs and you don't have land allocations and you have a whole pack of regulation that prevents you from doing green hydrogen. So you come to the Arabs in the Mediterranean and they say, oh, can you give us 150,000 hectares? And by the way, we'll give you 2% on the offtake. And we'll take a cable and then we can fuel our energy so it's carbon neutral. The problem is that now we understand the game. We know it. So we need to engage in a very serious conversation where it's the afterthought and not the thought that is on the table. You can translate this to every single policy. Let's take fiscal policy. In Europe, because it's a huge bureaucracy and it knows how to create regulations, they invented this word which is grey list. It's amazing. It's a massive tool. Basically, it prevents countries where you put them on the grey list to wire money. And it prevents also migrants who are transferring only to Morocco $10 billion a year to send money back to their country so they can stay in European banks. And you say, you know what, we're not sure about how you handle money and how you do stuff and everything. And by the way, you have way too low fiscal rates in some zones. And then Global South negotiators come to Berlaymont, they come to Brussels, and they say, guys, did you notice there are countries in Europe called Luxembourg, Ireland, Liechtenstein, Andorra? Their fiscal rate is half what we have in our countries. And they say, oh, but we need unanimity in order to reform fiscal votes. So are we going to engage in a real conversation where we can put the real problems on the table? And the last one is migration. You come to us in delegations with very smart people saying, we want you to be the gatekeepers of migration. But by the way, can we take your engineers because we have a shortage of engineers and coders? That's reality, that's on the ground. And we say, okay, but can you invest in our countries? Because we cannot be just consumers and you cannot just sell us planes and trains and stuff. We need to become a market if you don't want to have a lot of migrants. They say, no, it's very complicated. We want to reallocate industry, reindustrialize Europe. Okay, so it's a lose-lose situation. And by the way, we look at Europe as well, and I will finish with this, like crybabies. Because in 2015, Europe went almost to civil war over 1 million refugees. In Africa, we managed 18 million refugees and migrants every year. And we have 1/4 of the revenue. So the main idea is, will there be a moment where we will rise up to the words of Antonio Gramsci and have, the pessimism of the intellect, but also the optimism of the will, and have enough people that will live up to the promise of Jean Monnet?
Thank you very much. Well, the audience reacted already, but if in this long-distance relationship, we have to find the pragmatic approach. We have to find the topics or the areas on which we'll put on the table the real problems and we'll show that there is an added value of this new approach, and that's how we'll convince to continue. What are the examples that you would like really to mention?
I think the most important conversation is based on two things. Where do we draw the line between intellectual property and best cost zones? Which means how many European companies are ready to invest in best cost and labor intensive zones, and how much will we allow talents to circulate in between the two borders of the Mediterranean? So there need to be a conversation where we can send skilled labor to Europe, and we can do a deal where they have to come back after a certain point to their home countries to give additional value to those countries. And the second thing is to pay the real price on carbon, because there is a difference of 5 times between the price of carbon in Europe and the price of carbon in Africa. And what is completely crazy is that it took us 30 years to build an industry south of the Mediterranean. Now we export cars from Morocco, but also from South Africa. And we only contribute to global warming at like 2 or 3%. Europe contributes to 20%. But then you put on the carbon tax and you say, you guys who are not polluting, if you want to export cars to Europe, you need to do it with solar. Whereas fossil fuels are much cheaper for us and much more relevant. So we need to have these harsh, politically incorrect conversations where we draw the line, and what we really expect from Europe is a very simple thing, a thing that makes a lot of relationships work. And it's not love, it's consistency. Because if we have consistency, and we have consistent policies, and we have long-term policies, we can commit to a relationship. That, in my opinion, is the most pressing, important conversation, because we need to retain some of those talents in our countries to build our own ecosystems, because we are your market of tomorrow. You will not export to other countries because you have non-tariff tariffs and you have people who want to raise tariffs. So you have to come to our countries in order to sell sophisticated goods. But we need to build the middle class, we need to build elites, we need to build industries where we have much more power purchase.
Thank you very much. I very like.
Can I just come in for one important point? Both of you, and I think you raised it, regulation. And I think the biggest threat to EU today, in the short term, with Trump, is regulation. If Trump does even half of what his rhetoric is saying today, and makes doing business in America easier, where do you think the capital is going to go? From EU or from India? I think India is also over-regulated. And I think the biggest threat today is not this rhetoric about 2%, 5% and trade wars and tariff duties, etc. It is the ease of the magnitude of potential capital movement back to America, where it becomes easier to do business and access to the world's largest market. Where would intelligent capital go? And I think this is a point that perhaps EU also needs to think about. Ease your regulations. You have regulated artificial intelligence out of your continent already, before it is born. Now, is that the way you want to go forward? I don't know. These are questions. They are equally applied to India, by the way.
Well, I fully agree. I also wanted to ask this question about this perception of over-regulation, because we all know that innovation needs flexibility, but sometimes behind some of the main regulations, there are fundamental principles and values that are that we have to stick together. And that was also my question, because I think that we are well served, a lot of critical thinking, that's exactly what we want, but can we identify in this context fundamentals where it's important to stick together? And after, when we talk about consistency, how to ensure this in this quite unpredictable world in which we are living? It's for both, the question.
Well, I think on the fundamentals, there is something that we all agree on in this room, is that Europe was built on a great general philosophical idea that in this continent there were people who saw the damages of war for centuries and wanted to build this space where mostly Germany and France and the UK would, for once, keep the continent stable. And there is one area where Europe is not contributing enough and not understanding where it could play an amazing role, which is to help us have more thinking, help us have produce more reports. I heard people in the morning saying that there are too many reports in Europe. We are lacking reports. in Africa. But there is a huge bias in the way Europe is contributing to critical thinking, not convictions, thinking, and not stuff that is ideologically motivated and financed by big business to some specific research centers or think tanks. Thinking, academic thinking, research. The main bias that the EU had is that when they allocate money for thinking in the South, 70% of this money goes to institutions that are within a radius of 30 miles out of Brussels. So if you don't empower African economists, because there is a huge red tape if you want to become a licensed economist that is able to be paid by the EU, basically you need to fill in forms for a year. But this barrier to entry is part of the spoil system that the bureaucracy created because they want to find jobs for former Euro members of the parliament, and they have this whole ecosystem of consultants next to Brussels that they have to feed. But the real issue is that we've had so many thinking that was Eurocentric about Africa, which is just like crazy. Why is this white guy coming from Brussels will go to Benin and give us the good solutions for Benin? We will need economists from Benin to do this. So Europe has to reinvent its rules within this spoil system and within this ecosystem, this monster that it has created of thinking and bogus studies that you can pile up and use. And even people in the ministries in Africa, they're just joking. They're just laughing about this. They just say, okay, just tell us which boxes we have to check to get the funding, and we'll sign up to any study you give us. But this is essential. If Europe wants to do something concrete, it needs to have a special grant and a special fund to have economists working on economy about Africa by Africans. That's the most critical thing, because we need to take the problem from the grassroots and not like implant ideas that are stupid. I'll give you the most stupidest idea that was 20 years ago. It was called desert tech. I mean, some guys from Brussels and from Germany, they said, okay, we're going to do a sun belt going from Morocco to Libya. And we're going to put solar panel all over there. They just didn't quite look at the map to realize that Morocco and Algeria are not talking. So this is not possible. Most of the Sahel had Al-Qaeda starting to do some terrorist attacks there. But still, this idea was infectious, and every European delegation coming to Africa was like, we want to build desert tech. We want to give you money, and then we'll put out a cable so we can get the green energy. But we need to fight those intellectually seducing ideas coming from grassroots Europe, and we need our own thinking coming from the South, made by the South.
Thank you. Mr. Schickerman, up to you for the overregulation, the need of flexibility, and at the same time how we can ensure this consistency and predictability, and what are the fundamentals to stick together.
I don't have very much to say more than I already have, but let me give you the Indian example, which is now being reformed. 2 years ago, I wrote a report called Jailed for Doing Business. We listed out all the business regulations. There are 69,233 of them, of which 26,134 can get you imprisoned. And the day the report was published, the Prime Minister's office got in touch with us that how can we do these reforms? And so there was a committee, and after a year, a new law has been enacted. It's called the Jan Vishwas Amendment Act. And do you know how many regulations they decriminalized? 113. Statistically insignificant. We thought that, there was some energy and it was going to go faster, and it just didn't work out. Right now, as we talk, Jan Vishwas 2 is being constructed. Let's hope it fixes itself more. I think a similar study, you need to introspect. You don't need India to tell you what to do. You don't need Africa funding problems or whatever. What you need to see is America is getting more competitive and doing business is easier. Just the flow of capital will, like a magnet, if Trump delivers even half of what he speaks in rhetoric, will go. India will lose capital too. Why would you want to be in a difficult business environment when the world's largest market is calling you? So I think both EU and India, we need to fix. So you do a similar study. I have a friend of mine who runs a restaurant, a very small example. Of a 1,000 square meter plot, he bought the plot next door so that he could expand his operations. Do you know how much time it took him to get the permission? 18 months. Same location, same guy, same adjoining plot, same business, same people, same capital. And it took him 18 months, by which time he was exhausted and he was wondering whether to continue or not. So I think a new dynamism that 500 people, maybe you need 500 not entrepreneurs, maybe you need 500 policymakers who are dynamic as well to help you restructure your regulatory framework for the new world, for the topic is something like 2040 for this conference. So when you're talking 2040, don't look at 4 years. You look at the middle of this 21st century. How do you see Europe in the middle in 2050 or 2040 is how you need to work backwards and fix it. Let Trump be just a trigger, but don't do it for Trump. Don't do it for your protection. Do it for your people. Do it for your business. Do it for your jobs.
Well, thank you. I think that the message is very clear. We all want this. Investment flow of capitals. Well, I must say that with my experience and in the European Commission and from national level, I must say that it's very easy also to ask, we do something at European level, but I'm thinking immediately of all those national legislations and all these negotiations where every single member state is trying to keep very jealously every small piece of this legislation. So that's why maybe I think in the new commission this idea of the 28th regime will be at least a laboratory to see if it works. Maybe that will be applicable for many other areas, and I very much welcome. But just to let you know that there is always this tension between what is good for the European level, because we want to be seen as EU, but immediately after at national level there is a lot of differences. But now,
can I just clarify here? We have the same problem in India, where the union government and the state governments very often are at conflict with each other, and the rules and the laws don't work. Constitutionally, there are certain businesses, certain activities, labor, for instance, where both it's a concurrent subject. The state and the union government need to work together. There are certain aspects which only the union can do, let's say foreign affairs. And there are certain things which only the state does, let's say agriculture. So we have those problems. What is EU between different countries is India with different states, is as difficult. And I'm not saying it's any task for a politician. That's why we elect politicians. That's how we outsource our aspirations to somebody who is a go-getter, who can get things done, not for me alone, but for the country. And I think you need a new set of politicians who can bring a new consensus of growth, of jobs, of taking Europe back to 1950s, 1940s, Europe, where it was burgeoning with ideas, with institutions, with energy, and bring that back. I know it's going to be difficult because the demographics has changed in Europe. You don't have enough young people. Import them. Make them your people, and then bring out the new deal. Look, you can either do it voluntarily, or you will be forced to, or you will be dead and gone.
I fully agree with you. I think that that's now one of the main challenges, really, to pass from what was already done the previous years, and now we are living in a new time, in a completely different planet, so we need to be much, much faster and agile. Well, just to say welcome to the Prime Minister, Alexander De Croo. We are very happy to have you with us. And now we have really to to end this panel, maybe with one word, and that's my last provocative question to you: EU competitor or trusted partner? If you'd like to be taken seriously as competitor, Mr. Schickerman, what is the key word?
Competitor or a partner?
Yes.
It is today a partner, and by tomorrow, let's say 2040, that partnership needs to be strengthened. You need to expand it to geographies where growth is happening, and it is not the West, it is the East. And not only India, but China, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Thailand, and all these geographies. So I think a further strengthening and consolidation of this partnership is very necessary. How you go about it is that will determine how fast things will happen. These economies are growing very fast. Their footprints are increasing. India is talking about being the peace determinant for the Indian Ocean region already. Indian Ocean region has $7 trillion of trade going in and out of it. And so you need to be partnering with us. You can also partner with other countries, but I think from trust to strengthening and a consolidation of that trust and into tangible economic, strategic, and defense slivers is what is the need of the hour.
Thank you. Mr. Alawi?
Well, I started my intervention by saying that we are in this dysfunctional long-distance relationship. I think, like in most relationships, the most important thing right now is that we need to have the talk to clarify this relationship and to put some sanity in it, because the most important thing is to remember that geography will not be changed. We are neighbors. We have a sea that has become a cemetery, that has created a tragic humanitarian situation. So the only way forward is to find the kind of economic partnership where we both get something out of it, and where we can have consistency, timing, and we can create wealth together. And I believe now the responsibility lies in the hands of Europe, because they need to enter the business of making decisions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this very rich panel. So that's the end of this part. I would like immediately to ask Antoine Borde and Guillaume Closet to join me on stage for the second wake-up call. Thank you very much. So it's time for the second wake-up call from business representative. I have the honor to present to you Antoine Borde, Vice President, Artificial Intelligence, Helsing, and Guillaume Closet. I will not present you anymore. Everyone in this room knows who you are. So first, Antoine, if I may, a very, very clear question. We are talking about artificial intelligence. So what is the state of play? What is the place of Europe in this so strategic and critical field?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. So I work at Helsing, who's a European defense company, working at the intersection of AI and defense. So of course we look at AI very, very accurately, and we build AI as well. I think we've all seen in the last few years the acceleration of what AI can do. You've seen it in your daily life, of course, in many different ways. ChatGPT has been mentioned many times already as a tool, as a joke. It's really like common knowledge now. And this is meant to continue. And my point now is more that it's meant to accelerate as well. So I've been talking about also, I've been hearing today about how to catch up, how to see the tide of change, what we can do. I think it's a wake-up call, and my point is like, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the acceleration of AI. We are very convinced of that at Helsing. So in the field of defense, of course, and maybe I can go back to that after, but in the field of AI already. Why is it accelerating now? First off, because the technology and investment are concentrating further than ever. Before working at Helsinki, I worked 10 years at Meta in the AI laboratory. This is where I met Guillaume in a previous life. And so, of course, I've seen the growth of AI in the big American tech companies from very close. This has been never as powerful as now. There have been some kind of I would say, dispersion of talent at some point around 2020, 2022, with the creation of startups like Mistral in France, but a few others. If you look now, a lot of these startups have vanished, and they get back to the big tech companies who have been reabsorbing the talent. And Mistral might be the only exception now that does not belong to one of these big groups, which is, I think, very, very telling. The second point, so talent concentration, the second point is like there have been a lot of investments in infrastructure, has been mentioned. So we talk about catching up on infrastructure. I think we should just realize what's the gap. Okay, at Meta is $10 billion invested every year for the last 4 years. So this becomes brick and mortar and compute and energy. So now we'll start from there. And of course, this is building up because with infrastructure, you build technology. With technology, you build profit. With profit, we build infrastructure. This cycle is already underway. Okay, it's not like starting, it's already underway. Here, we think we want to build a cluster now. Okay, the UK strategy for last week was like we want to do 20x on compute. There's a European strategy. So this is all happening. I want you to realize this has been ongoing for the last 5 years over there. And so, of course, this stuff is hard to catch up, and this is compounding. And the third, and I think maybe, Guillaume, you would like to add something to this. I think the third element is, of course, the new administration. Of course, we don't know yet what's coming, but a lot is going to come. Okay, it's already underway. Okay, we saw already announcement. We saw no consortium being made. That's actually very, very true for defense. And we will have an acceleration about the technology, the revenue, and then the technology back. So in terms of wake-up call now, I think it's not time for looking at what's around. It's not looking at like what are the good ideas. It's not the best time to do R&D. We need to act. We need to build, and we need to produce. Okay, we need to produce because otherwise it's going to get very, 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 very difficult.
Well, thank you very much, Antoine, for this clear state of play. I would like now to give the floor to Guillaume before asking you what's next and what's really the needed actions. Because, Guillaume, you was the special advisor of Jean-Claude Juncker, the previous president of the European Commission, and you published the first report at European level on AI. Probably for you that sounds quite familiar, some of the constants that we have today, because that was already in the report. But what's your point of view today, and also as a wake-up call, not as another report?
Well, so we know each other for the last 10 or 15 years, and I also saw the guy who launched the first AI industrial initiative in 2015 with the EBU and the private sector of media, because I thought that media was a window to push the development of AI and to develop awareness in the field. And when Jean-Claude Juncker proposed me to be special advisor to the presidency of the Commission, I said, we discussed about the different risks that I may imagine. There was a risk with regard to the power of this tech company, and maybe this is one of the reasons you left. I don't remember the company, but I don't want to name anyone. It starts by, well, they changed their name. Anyway, but one risk I said is we can in the Silicon Valley you have people who might think as they were gods, and if they have the power, they can use the power of this company in order to impose their vision of the world. And you might imagine that they combine their vision, their power, and the support of the American government, the American administration. And this is something which is likely to happen, so we need to prepare ourselves about that. And this discussion took place in 2018, and in the report that I made, I was not so direct, but you might clearly understand that there was this big challenge, because understanding the Silicon Valley is not only understanding an ecosystem of innovation, it's understanding a kind of philosophy. And we need to understand that. That's very critical.
And now, there might be that some of these people come to power in the state. And it's really a geopolitical issue, and we need to react, because if we don't react, it means that we pave the way for them. First thing. Second thing, I said, we need to be aware that we can't only regulate, and AI, generative AI was already understood as coming very quickly. So we need to experiment. This was 7 years ago. The potential of this within a certain number of sectors. Media sector, very easy to do. Should we have invested 200 million euros? And I mean, the media sector in Europe might be much more powerful today. Health sector also. So we need a systemic strategy using all the tools of policy, from regulation, impulsion, support to transnational projects, support to innovation, to ecosystem, cooperative ecosystem, development of talent, etc. And to be honest, 7 years after, we just made regulation, and we badly designed this regulation. And my proposal, now time has gone by, so I can say about my vision of how we should have dealt with the question of GAFA, and you might tell me I'm right or wrong. But my political recommendation was, let's invite, at the European Parliament, all the community of people who have worked for the GAFA, and I thought about Tristan Harris and the community of 200 people who are very rich, who are PhD, etc., and who can tell you the risk and the challenge we have ahead. And let's avoid a fight between a commissioner, I mean the small David, and the tech CEO, which are the Goliath. And the mistake we did is, for communication reason, we push the debate between David versus Goliath, and we did not leverage the power of the tech American community, which is focused on values. What do you think?
Antoine, what is your reaction?
Yeah, I don't agree.
Okay, but
no, I don't agree, because I think so. So what I agree is that now it would have been maybe even better before, but you know, we are what we are, and who we are and where we are. These companies, and we talk about them when I said they accelerate, they will become more powerful. They have not been made by politicians. Now they are going to be accelerated by politicians. Okay, they are going to be accelerated by politics. That's pretty clear, but they have not been made by them. So I don't think the solution would have been to take like these people and put them in the European Commissions to be the buffer. I think it's like...
I didn't say that at all. Huh?
Okay, maybe I didn't understand. Okay, I can tell you what I think. It's like, and it was said before at the previous roundtable, at the previous wake-up calls, so actually we pretty agree on the wake-up calls, is that we need the entrepreneur to build companies, okay? And they need to have their hands free so that they can build company as fast as those guys. As fast as those guys. It's only going to, for me, a lot of it is going to matter about speed of execution. If you work in these companies, and I've done that for a while, all they care about is speed of execution. Nobody talks here about speed of execution. Okay? I can tell you, when I say time for action, I would look now who is able to build the capability to defend Europe with AI and software this year. Not in 2030, this year. Okay? Because on the other hand, they're going to build it this year. Anduril, American company founded in 2017 by Palmer Luckey, a strong Trump supporter who left Meta to build that. So they've been raising now. They announced, I think it was just yesterday, the creation of a new factory in Ohio, the state of former Senator J.D. Vance, with $1 billion investment to build a factory, 8,000 jobs, and they're going to produce hundreds of drones per month. This is yesterday. So this is a factory. What announced also the Republic of China a bit before is that they want by 2026, so this is not this year, this next year, they have produced 1 million strike drones.
So what can we do
so
in Europe?
What I'm saying it's now is like we need to, this is now that's happening. It's not like, oh, how do I design the drone? It's like, no, by 18 months, China will have 1 million of them. Okay, so, and I'm not even talking about Russia and Ukraine, which are on their own race, building that, which is their own. So what we need now, because that's also what you say, is that it's like increase speed. Okay, so how do we increase speed? It was the question about capital or investment, because you want return on investment. Return on investment, you don't want to wait for 5 or 10 years, right? I mean, depending, but you want portfolio a bit faster than that, I suppose. So how do you do that? It's like, of course, we talk about talent here being something that is true, we train them, but they will not stay forever, okay? They're already going, but they will not stay to save the continent if everything's going to flame. I mean, so some are going away, some are coming back, some are going. So what they want is to have a hope. It was said before, I think it's very important to say, I can build a successful business here. I believe it's possible. So I think that's the first point, that these people need to think it's possible. Right now, I would say we're at 50-50. Okay? I'm
polite.
Yeah, I'm making it as 50-50. And I think the narrative that we have now about US accelerating and China, etc., I think it's more or less true. But I think it's difficult as well, because it's a bit of a self-realizing prophecy. If you tell me it's accelerating and it's gone, then of course people don't build business, or they go abroad to build their business, and then you realize that. So I think we should be very careful about the discourse. I think the discourse should be about hope and building, but it should be also about pragmatic, right? So pragmatic is like, you want to build a business. How do you have access to the capital now? How do I make, okay, the regulation is there. How can I open the regulation for you so that you can go faster? There was this question in Europe about some zone when you can go faster, you can experiment faster. At Helsing we build drones, we take to experiment. We scout around Europe, where can I experiment with drone? Where can I fly above 500 meters to test them? It takes us a lot of time to find where we can fly. Okay, so there is a lot of examples like that where people look around and see, so you can facilitate that. And after, it's also the fact about contract. Okay, because there is a big point about, and maybe it's closer to defense, but seriously, if you go in the health sector, and we talked about it, if you go in the insurance, you go in a lot of things, people say, oh yeah, we need to raise money, Series A, maybe it's possible in Europe. I think it's Series B, still possible. Series C, getting harder, okay? What's coming between B, C, and D is the revenue, okay? So of course, and the problem is that some people say we should have access to more capital. Sure, we should have access to big contract. If you have big contracts, you build business here, and maybe you attract capital from elsewhere, okay, from the Gulf, from the US, because they might see here you can make good money with the investment, so you come. Okay, so I think there's a big role that can be in terms of defining contract that would not go to all the usual suspects about the big companies that were mentioned before. I think you mentioned the General Motors of the world, right? We have the General Motors of Europe, right? I'm not going to name them, but they take a big share of the contract because that's the way it is. Okay, SpaceX got his first contract by suing the US government. Okay, Palantir got his first contract by suing the US government to change the balance.
Yeah, but you are right. No, you are completely right. But we need public and private command rapidly, which is more important than having access to capital. Because if you have, I give you an example. One key issue of WHO is the quality of diagnosis, cellular initial diagnosis. You put a budget of, let's say, 100 million in Europe to push a European solution, you develop a unicorn in 2 years. But we are not going to do that. We are not going to do that because we are going to push a research program, which is not... We need to have a continuum from research to industrialization with short term. And it's what you are doing at Helsing. Yeah. And it works because there is a momentum in the mindset of leader and politician that we need to invest in defense. And
I can tell you, just as Guillaume on that, there's a momentum, but the momentum didn't come by itself. People didn't come for us. They didn't say, oh, please, let's create an Helsing because we need European defense.
I know.
No, it's like, it's created by that, and then you push and you knock at the doors, and after 2 or 3 years, and I think we've been very quick, you get them. And so it was not easy. It's not obvious. So that's why I'm starting by hope and the belief that it's possible. And then maybe a last word I would like also talk about hope. I think it's about a matter of courage as well. It's a matter of courage. It's a matter of the courage of the people who want to build a business now. Okay. I think they need. It needs to be a bit sometimes silly to build this business, but I think that's part of the thing. It needs courage from, of course, government and saying, I'm going to invest in this company and not the obvious one. It's more risky, but it might pay off. Maybe politically difficult, maybe investment difficult. And it's courage, indeed, from the big industry player for saying, I'm going to work with this new company, etc. The first Airbus crashed in the woods, okay? The first, I think it was A320, it crashed in the woods. Okay, we could have just have no Airbus if we stopped there.
There we have the potential of a new industrial leader worldwide, and we have others in the health sector where we have huge interest, but we need to change our mindset, and we need to be in a position to speed up. And the question is fast track.
Yeah, and
let's develop fast track with a continuum from...
Yeah, so if I may, I would like really to summarize, because I see also a lot of common between the two wake-up calls. It's very clear we need hope and courage, but we need to change the speed of implementation. We need to do it with entrepreneurs, and that's why we need also to make a change on our narrative. That was also mentioned by different continents, if I may say. Yeah. So today I see a very, very big challenge where business and academia, but also institutions to the civil society, we join saying, without changing this narrative of the attractiveness of Europe, of the Europe giving hope and able to have courage to change things rapidly, it's not possible. So I think that one of the main steps is to continue, but of course, I will finish with this. Let's change the speed of execution, and let's do it with entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And now for our closing session, it's my privilege and honor to invite to the stage Prime Minister of Belgium, Alexander De Croo. Please, Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for coming. We have approximately half an hour to save the world, or at least European Union. We are under Chatham House rules, so it's going to be an interesting session. I'm going to ask simple questions, and Prime Minister is going to give simple answers. You know, one Italian philosopher, I think Gramsci, said that when the old world is dying and the new world is not being born again, this is time of the monsters. And we are in this time, when we see that the geopolitical situation in the world is changing. And we talked a lot about that in our previous sessions. One thing which, of course, stood out from all of the panelists is the new reality in the US, and also the new reality of transatlantic relations. A lot of the speakers said that US is not happy with how the world is standing today. They're not happy because they think that it effectively curbs their initiative or their ambition to be still the leaders of the world. Some actually said that, you know, we are in time when people, or US for that matter, will try to unreveal what was built since the Second World War. And they are going to ask from European Union to help them. My question is, are we going to do it? Are we going to help them? Or are we going to create or try to create our own narrative in order to basically create a space where European Union also feels strong, democratic and resilient? Thank you.
That was your simple question?
Wait for my other two, you know.
Okay. I think for us Europeans, the main message should be we need to stop reacting, but we need to adapt. We need to adapt to a new reality that has started actually quite some time ago. I think it started before the first Trump period. And we can do a lot of thinking about how we regret that new reality, but it's there. So first of all, what we shouldn't do is get dragged into this reactive mode. And that, we've seen it now over the past weeks. We will be confronted with, specifically the United States, every day things will come up. And every day we will be tested. And we will be tested on, it's a bit of a game. Okay, what do they react on? What are they not reacting on? And based on that, they will define their strategy. Difficult because a part of it will be fiction and a part of it will be very real. To take one example, I think the whole discussion on Greenland is way less innocent than we think. We have not reacted on Greenland. We've basically told the Danish, figure it out. And I think it is way more dangerous than we think. I mean, this comes at a moment where in Greenland there is a discussion about having a more independent course. And I mean, the implications of what could happen there or the balance of power shifting are dramatic for us as Europeans. Even more, I mean, this is a NATO partner telling another NATO partner, you know, your territory, I want to buy it, and if you don't react, I might actually send troops. I mean, if the Turkish would do that about a small Greek island, everything would be on fire. And here we basically laugh it away.
Why?
Good question, because I think we haven't learned from last time, because we've been a bit complacent and say, this is a stupid story, it's not going to happen, and so on and so on. It's deeper than we think. And that's going to be a part of the exercise, is what do you react on, and where you say, sorry, this is a red line, no way. And react in the same way, a bit what actually I think the Mexicans did about the changing of name of the Mexican Gulf, which, I mean, it's a futile discussion, but they reacted a bit at the same level. That's going to be a big exercise on what you react on and what don't you react on. But if you have to, I think we have to. In a broader sense, people say this is a transactional relationship and so on and so on. Okay, if it is more transactional, then in transactions things are easier if you have strength. And we can do a lot of discussions about tactics and so on and so on. In the end, it is going to be much more power-driven. And we as Europeans, we need to build up our own strength. Build up our own strength is on a few things. One of them is competitiveness. This discussion, I mean, we pushed this discussion 3 years ago in Europe and seeing what was happening. Our competitive strength is going to be key. And we haven't really made a lot of progress in that. I think the European Commission has great intentions. But I think our business community looks at this and say, okay, can you show me in the first months that you actually do mean business? What we need in this, cost of energy, we have to work on it, but it will take some time. Implementing the Draghi report, I think it's great, but it will take some time. We need to figure out a few things where we can show that we have immediate impact.
But do you think, basically, you know, all the reports, and we discussed about them, Draghi, Letta, even Conclave report, everybody's saying we should be doing something now. Yeah. But do you think there is like a political will inside of the European Union, in the member states, to actually do something?
I think there is political will, and I think there's also possibility, and one of them is on red tape. Red tape is a very direct thing where our business world is, our business world is not recruiting. The only place where they are recruiting is departments to fill out forms. And it's in Belgium, I know a few Belgian businesses who are building departments of 50 people just to do all the reporting. And it's this idea of policy by reporting that is actually not going to create anything. I mean, no one is going to read those reports, no one is going to analyze it. And so on the red tape dimension, that is a very quick and a very direct way where we as Europeans can show to our business community we do mean business. And it is going to have an impact on the very short on the very short term.
But this should happen on the EU level.
It should happen on the EU level because the majority of what is happening now on layers of red tape is actually coming from the European level, and often national policies are dependent on that. And to me, that's something that the Commission can do quite quickly, but that means changing the directives. I mean, changing the legislation. It needs to be a bit further than just cosmetics. Now, you could say this is not going to be the fundamental solution. I agree. But it will lift a few of our business leaders out of their manic depression, in which they are today. I mean, if you look at some of the major economies, the business world is totally depressed, and a big part of economy is also a bit psychology, and they're looking at, okay, is there somewhere some light? And energy is going to be hard, some things are going to be hard, but that's one where you can immediately show, okay, you know, we're going to do something.
So basically we do small steps which we can do right now, and then tackle the ones which are more politically difficult.
And maybe if I can link a bit to the discussion that we had here before on our economic strength in specific domains. You talked about AI, but you could apply it also to other domains. I think the key difference that there is between Europe and the United States, it's not so much our scientific capacity. I think on the scientific side, one could say that we're actually at par with them. But when we talk about what you call speed of execution, the key difference is the strength and the level of sophistication of the capital market. That's the big, big difference between the United States and Europe. In the United States, you have a scientific project, unproven, with a probability of 20% that it could work, you will find financing. You will find financing, and you will have financiers who will say, it's very probable that it's not working, but if it is working, I'm going to have a big jackpot. That we don't have here. And that financing is private financing. And so the solution in Europe is not come up with more public financing and more type of programs taking away all risk and de-risking and so on. That's not at all the solution. The solution is finally building a common capital market. And I say finally, I was finance minister 6 years ago. At that point, the discussion between the finance ministers was already 10 years old. And we're still not there. I mean, what we see today is fundamental research is happening here. The moment you need to push it through, that the real financing needs to happen, it's mostly American venture capitalists or private equity firms who use our money, because we don't have a lack of capital in Europe. I mean, we have savings. It's money of our pension funds that is going to American VCs that are coming here and that are financing and taking the value added of
so basically, how we can unlock it.
And so it is, please, let's get away with all these compasses and monitors and de-risking and so on and so on. You need to bring a bit of raw capitalism back into the system. And you are in economic models where it is a bit the singularity system. I mean, the one who's right and who grows gets the full market. That is perfect for that type of financing, especially in AI, for example. And so we come with solutions which are mostly public financed, and if it's public finance, it needs to be de-risked because it's politicians' money, I mean, politicians' responsibilities money, and it's totally the opposite of what we need. That's one thing. And then the second thing is we're proud of our single market, but in so many domains, it's not there. It's not there. We talked about AI. If we talk about biotech, in Belgium we have quite a powerful biotech cluster. You are a promising biotech firm. If you want to grow, the money will come from Americans. And if you go to market, your first go-to-market is never going to be Europe. Never. Because you have to go with 27 files to prove your economic case. And so your first market will be in the United States, then you will go to Japan, maybe you will go to China, and maybe in the end you come to us. So we are, as Europeans, really, in Belgium, we say someone is taking the cheese away from your bread. This is exactly what is happening. I mean, we do the fundamental research, often with public money. The scaling up and the value that comes from that is going to American VCs with our money, with our pensioners' money. And then the social benefit of, for example, bringing it to the market is not coming to us because we all want to have our different, different systems. So if we talk about speed of execution, that is it. And don't ask politicians to come with programs for speed of execution. That's not what we do. It's not our specialty.
Especially in European Union.
We have to know what we're good at. I mean, as politicians, what are we good at? Setting goals, giving direction. That's what we should do. But doing the innovation ourselves or explaining how the innovation should happen, that's not what we're good at. We should stay away from that.
One question, which is not simple, and I didn't want to ask it, but now I have to. You talked about bringing back a little bit of this spirit of raw capitalism. How goes this hand in hand with the social notion of European Union? Because basically, you know, the social state is why we love European Union, why we love to live here, and why citizens are living here. So is this compatible? I mean, how do you increase competitiveness, but on the other hand, you don't basically take away the social rights which were fundamental for Europe?
I don't see a contradiction in that. And when I talked about raw capitalism, it was more on the financing side. But if you look a little bit forward, I mean, our demography is totally to the benefits of workers. I mean, our working population is decreasing. And I mean, we know it. The next 20 years, the number of people is going to decrease. And we do need people in plenty of domains. AI will take some things over, but it will free more time for people to do more interesting work. So I'm convinced that in the years that come, salaries are going to increase. And salaries should increase. Because fundamentally speaking, I mean, there is going to be a lack of labor force in the years to come. So that balance is going to go in a direction that enables people who work to actually get a good benefit out of it. Now, and the idea of having a social system that is well-being financed and so on, I mean, this is in our DNA. That's not going to be washed. It's not going to be washed away. But please create some environment where entrepreneurs, and we have those entrepreneurs, can actually do their stuff here in Europe and not be lured away to the other side of the Atlantic. So I'm not scared on that.
No, but it's you know, now listening to you, it's interesting because you know, you haven't been here for the parts of the sessions today, but it seems like you were, you know, because actually,
you know, we Belgians are everywhere.
Yeah, maybe it's the ghost of this palace, but no, it's true. What you said, I think this was said numerous times by different speakers in the previous sessions. So you know, it proves the point that maybe, you know, we have the goal, we know what to do, but now the problem is how to do it. And here I come to the question of leadership. You know, we know who is leading in the US, we know who is leading in China, we know who is leading in India, but do we know who is leading in European Union? Because at the end of the day, in a perfect world, it should be European Council, but European Council which is effective and functioning. Now, at least this is the outside look, and maybe it's wrong, we see that there are more and more divisions inside of European Council. In this time and age when we need basically effectiveness and strong European Union, how do we come to that? I mean, do you see the light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, you know, we see that there is a lot of right-wing governments who probably are going to come to power in certain countries in Europe. Is there, you know, a ray of hope that European Council is going to actually perform the function that is going to be
So maybe
done.
first on when you say there is clear leadership in the United States, yes, but let's wait where they are in 6 months. I mean, it's unavoidable that certain things will explode. The relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, how did they call it? I think the Financial Times calculated it in the number of Scaramucci's. This Scaramucci guy was 11 days spokesperson of Trump. And they say, okay, how long is this? How many Scaramucci's will it take? I don't know yet, but I think that there is such a diversity in that administration. Some classic Republican people who know their stuff, like this Mr. Kellogg for Ukraine. I mean, this is classic Republicans combined with some mavericks and with some really unexpected people. So there will be tension. It's unavoidable that there will be tension. And we as Europeans, let's get in the same mindset as the Americans. Let's wait and let's be ready to react or to take the lead and push where it hurts. They never hesitate to push where it hurts. The Americans have always tried to divide us Europeans. That's not new to Mr. Trump. The Americans have always done so. The British have also done so with the Brexit. The moment that the Brexit was there, they also pushed to divide us. So we should put ourselves in that position. Now, on your question on who's leading Europe. Look, on paper, if you look at the trio that has the key positions in the European Union, being Kaja Kallas, Antonio Costa, and Ursula von der Leyen, on paper, they should be able to work together much better than in the past administration.
We always look good on the paper, you know, inside of the European Union.
Yeah, but in the past administration, even on paper, it didn't look that well, unfortunately. Or when we had to choose who was sitting where. Okay, this is Chatham House rule, so please don't use this against me. But at least you have there three people who can be very clear on, okay, let's do a division of labor, let's work together, and so on. So in theory, it looks quite good. The issue, of course, is going to be, I mean, Antonio Costa can play his role as long as, of course, the Council lets him play that role. I think the key challenge we have these days is that, and I think we have strong leadership. I mean, Kaja Kallas is on the top of her game, Ursula is even more so, and Antonio is I think, has all the qualities to do so. The issue you see today is that national governments are quite weakened across the board. I mean, Germany is in a difficult situation, France is in a difficult situation, the Netherlands is in a difficult situation, Belgium hasn't had a government for 6 months, but that's normal. And so many national governments are actually in a quite difficult situation. That makes the functioning of the Council difficult. And that will, I think, make it more and more difficult for Antonio Costa to play the role that he would have to play. And what I find a bit strange is we know that the Americans do everything to divide us. We know that they will try to work on the bilateral level, and we all know that on the bilateral level we lose. We all of us know it.
We know, but
and when Mr. Trump wins, everyone is scrambling to their telephone and to be able to say, "I'm the first one who had Trump on the phone."
This is what I wanted to say.
I'm amazed by that. I had a good excuse not to call him because I was a demissionary government, so I had a good excuse to say, actually, I'm not really looking to speak. But that tendency is that very short-sighted tendency that I might have on the short run some individual wins, but as a group we lose of course. You know, and there is talks about the fact that in Europe governments are pushing to the right and to the more conservative side. That's politics. I mean, I wouldn't dramatize it. That's how it goes. I mean, yeah, there's always been shifts in the European Council.
Until it stays in the context of democracy.
It's always been there. Who is in a capacity to take the lead? For the moment, I haven't seen it. But please, we should not let Mr. Trump decide for us who has the lead, because that's what he's doing. I mean, he's inviting certain people to the inauguration. He's giving kind of an advantageous role to certain and to others. I mean, it's us who should decide that. I would expect in the next 6 months that certain people will kind of grow in their role, but in general, we have leaders of the European institutions who are at the top of what they should, and we should put ourselves in a second role to push that. But in general, things go easier when Germany and France play their role.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask.
I guess that will come
eventually.
And as Benelux countries, if the Benelux countries get on the same line, we're a big country, and let's make that happen.
Talking about big countries, we talked about US, but we didn't say anything about China. And you have been sitting in the European Council for 5 years now, I think. Tell us a little bit your feelings, how do you see the evolution of relations between Europe and China?
Well, and that brings me to a broader point. We Europeans are leading in so many domains. It's about time that we start to act as leaders. And we don't. And especially towards China, that is a very clear one. I mean, if you are China, who is your #1 trading partner in the world? It's Southeast Asia. Who's your #2 trading partner in the world? It's the European Union. Only then is the United States. I mean, the United States is a #3 trading partner. In the end, the trade war or the tension with the United States from an economic point of view for China is not very important. We have way more leverage over China than that Mr. Trump has.
But do we understand that?
Well, we don't act like it. We don't act like it. And it's, you know, you have this classic view of our relationship with China is on 3 dimensions. I mean, they're partners on some domains, they're rivals on some domains, they're hostile on some other domains. That's a very classic view. I think it is time to go a level further and to stop putting our finger up. And that applies to China, but also to the rest of the world. I mean, the idea that we Europeans can walk around the world, put our finger up and say, listen to me, I'm going to tell you what you should do. I think that period is over. We should be clear on the things that we are important. We should be very clear with China that certain domains we will not share information. Certain domains we will just close the market. I know it angers them. I always say, you know, shielding off a certain part of the market, you shouldn't be angry for that. You've been doing that for decades. But on other domains, let's talk business and let's work. And we should craft our own path in that. Can we do it together with the United States? No problem. If not, okay, that's their call. But we have a way more leading role to play in that than the United States has a leading role to play in that. And I think we should. And then maybe besides China, I mean, we should be looking for partners in the world. And there's other parts of the world than only Europe, the United States, and China. So from that perspective, for example, Mercosur, I think is very important. It's very important. And I think Ursula von der Leyen made the right call in just pushing it through. And I hope we can get it through as fast as possible. And these are potential partners of European countries who are looking to trade. Let's go forward. Let's talk with Indonesia, India, the Philippines. I mean, there's so many big partners who are looking for trade and for relationships with us. So when in the beginning I said adapt and let's react, that's also what I mean. Let's choose our partners, let's start discussions with them, and let's craft it ourselves.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for this. two more questions before we conclude.
You said only 3 easy questions.
I know, but
you
provoked me, Prime Minister, with your interesting answers, and I think we need to take the advantage that you are here. You said rightly, and I think it was mentioned also before, that we need or we have to be less defensive and more proactive when it comes to trying to shape the new geostrategic dawn and the new geostrategic future. But, you know, I think we are always going in circles because we know we have to do it, but we don't do it. It seems like this defensive posture or crying game. Somebody said it's a crying game. I would say it's a waiting game of waiting what Elon Musk is going to do, how many tariffs we are going to get, is like part of our DNA. You know, how do you change the mindset? Because for the last, I would say, since I'm following European Union 30 years, we've always been reacting or being defensive. I mean, is there, you know, this, what needs to happen so that our mindset changes?
A phrase that comes to me, I don't know why, I think there was a quote, I think by Mike Tyson, who said, it's good to do planning until you get a punch in the face, which I kind of liked. So we got some punches, and so that should wake us up. And as I said, go away from the planning and the compasses and the strategies and so on. It's much more tactical these days. So we know that today the Trump team is drafting tariffs on Europe. We know that it is happening. It's not, let's please not be surprised if on the 21st of January this comes. So we should be in the same tactical game, preparing how we interact with that, not only by punching back, also by saying, you know, we know you have a problem with trade balance. We know that the United States has a problem with trade balance. That's a legitimate concern. I think they have a point there. By the way, Belgium is one of the countries which actually does not have a problem of trade balance with the United States. The United States has a surplus to Belgium. So we're the good example to all of you. But that might be because of the fact that there's a lot of headquarters here. But okay, let's say, okay, we're willing on certain domains to buy more from the United States. We are, look, okay, let's do this. But in exchange, we would want this and this and this. Yeah. So this tactical thinking, we have to get more into that. I think we also have to take away certain dependencies that we have. And we haven't talked about defense. But I think key discussion that we need to have. You know, in the coming years, we're going to spend way more on defense. That's good. Now, should it be 5%, like certain people say? I'm not convinced, but let's have a discussion on that. But maybe if all of us do 2%, that would be already a big start, especially us Belgians. So especially us Belgians. But we, you know, if we're going to spend more, we are going to spend more European. We are, because I want a return which is on the security side, but to be able to sell it to my voters, I also want an industrial return, and I also want a societal return of, it's a certain channel of education for a group in your population. If we want that to happen, our defense industry is dramatically fragmented in Europe, and it's dramatically fragmented because all of us have been buying national. I mean, our defenses are this last beacon of sovereignty where we think we can still decide on our own. So if we're going to spend way more public money in defense, there also needs to be way more private money for defense. If you want a defense industry that consolidates, that does M&A activity, that is buying certain activities which are still state-owned today, we will need a lot of private capital for that. Today, that private capital is not coming part because the capital markets problem which I talked about, but also because in Europe, ESG rules are making it impossible. A big part of our capital market is regulated by ESG rules, which I would not throw in the dustbin, but which today tell to big capital providers, don't invest in defense. I find that puzzling. I mean, I am full of environmental and social and governance rules, but today those rules take away a big part of capital. And I think that investing in our own defense is actually something which is worked for. So there's a big adaptation to be made there, and then it is happening. I mean, there is cross-border activity coming, but I mean, there is a big way to go to achieve that. And that should be our answer to the United States, who say spend more. I totally agree, spend more. But please, American friends, don't believe that the spend more is only going to be with your firms. That's not going to happen. I think in some domains I have no problem to buy American because they're better, but in other domains, please, you need to get better.
Yeah. Thank you, Prime Minister. I mean, if you ever lose your job, we would welcome you to the Conclave board, because I think, you know, the messages that you put forward
no one knows how long
perfect.
I will still sit here in Belgium.
I know, it's Belgium. For the end, give us your dream of European Union, or give us your idea how should European Union look like in 2040?
2040? Okay. So point one, enlargement. We haven't talked about enlargement. I think it would be a gigantic mistake if by 2040 the Western Balkan in its entirety is not part of the Union, and if Ukraine and Moldova would not be part of the Union. If we don't do that, we are just vulnerabilizing ourselves. I think Ukraine is a clear case, but the Western Balkan, if we don't pull them in, and I know they have a long way to go, we are just organizing vulnerability internal. That means we will be a Europe of not 27, probably 35, 36. If we are there, before we get bigger, we need to get better, which means that our functioning needs to dramatically improve to accommodate a bigger group. That is way beyond just a discussion about unanimity voting. That's way beyond, because if you do that, the financing flows will dramatically change. Certain countries who have been net receivers will become net contributors. Hello, Mr. Orban, be prepared for that. And many others, it will completely change the dynamic. All of us will win with that. Anytime that the Union has become bigger, we have grown, and the other countries have in a tremendous way grown. But we'll have to do own financing. We'll have to have our own sources of financing. Doing what is coming between now and 2040, thinking that we will continue to finance it with national contributions, I don't believe it. I think we are really at the border of what is possible, but also of what is democratically actually defendable. How it's done, what it is, okay, we'll have that discussion at that point, and then maybe last element on the purely democratic side. I'm convinced that by 2040 we will be electing our European leaders in a direct way. I'm convinced that well, there will be no problem with that. I'm not a candidate, please don't applaud for that. But that combination, larger, better functioning, own financing, and voting our own leaders, yeah, that's the dream for 2040.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. This is very nice for you. So you should all remember that he's not a candidate. He is not a candidate.
Not yet.
Not yet. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for these words. I think it was really insightful, and I think we got, I would say, confirmation that we are on the right path. I think that what we got from talking to you and from your ideas is that the strength of Europe is that you have diverse ideas, but that at the end of the day you have the same goal, to basically make Europe great again. So with this, with this, I'm concluding this part of Conclave, the International Conference. I would like to thank everybody for being with us. With some, we are going to see each other tomorrow, and with some, we are going to see you at the dinner, which is going to be in the Solvay house, I think. So thank you very much again, and bon appetit, or what? Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you. That was a nice discussion. Thank you.